Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is February 24th, 2022. Welcome to the bill hearings of the Ways and Means Committee. First up is Delegate Guyton, House Bill 664. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Hello, colleagues on the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, Delegate Michelle Guyton, District 42B, Baltimore County, and I have 5 bills for you today. So hopefully this one will seem familiar and you won't have many questions about it. We've passed this twice before in the House, and it is here in a very, very similar posture. So I'm here to respectfully request your consideration of House Bill 664. It simply requires that child care centers provide parents and guardians of children under 3 years old with information about the Maryland Infants and Toddlers program. This bill, like I said, it's passed for 2 years by the committee in the House, and this version is only different in that the language has been simplified at the request of the Senate committee. So the Maryland Infant and Toddlers program has been established for 35 years and is funded at $15 million. They serve families up until age 4, and they provide screenings, referrals, information, and services for special needs. And I'm going to skip all that because I have 5 bills, and I will just tell you the reason this is important is that most of our kids with disabilities are still not identified until they actually get into our public kindergarten programs, our preschool programs, and this will certainly increase their odds of success. I ask for your support for this simple, no-cost bill that will ensure that our families have the information and the supports they need so that all of our children are better prepared when entering school. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Guyton? Seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 664. Thank you, Delegate Guyton. Next, we have a Carroll County delegation bill that will be presented by Delegate Rose, House Bill 689.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and my wonderful colleagues here in the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 689 regarding our Board of Education in Carroll County. This is a pretty simple bill. The intent of the bill is to alter the term for our student representative from serving more than 1 term. In addition, we would like to alter the compensation of our board president, raising it from $9,000 per year to $13,000, and the other board members' compensation would raise from $8,000 to $12,000. Our delegation voted for this as a majority. I think I said unanimous. This one wasn't unanimous. We had someone absent and 1 abstained. But the majority of my colleagues felt very strongly, especially after the last year that we've been through. Our Board of Ed has worked very hard, a lot of extra hours, a lot of time, and we really felt that the time was right for us to raise their compensation. So I'll stop with that since we have a big day, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Are there any questions for Delegate Rose? Seeing none, thank you, Delegate Rose. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 689. Next, House Bill 769, Delegate Jones, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Dana Jones. I come before you today to reintroduce HB 769, which codifies the recommendations outlined in the Student Data Privacy Council's 2020 report and creates a reporting requirement to increase transparency and accountability. This bill passed unanimously through this committee last year with a few amendments that are reflected in this year's version of the bill. Additionally, it passed with overwhelming support on the House floor with a final vote of 113 to 24. The bill updates definitions based on the Council's recommendations to keep up with current technology advancements. This critical issue is a national priority, which has been underscored by the pandemic. The Council has found that since 2013, over 130 new state student privacy laws have been passed and over 1,000 bills were introduced on topics in all 50 states. The bill also reestablishes the Council to help implement the recommendations and continue to study the best practices for student data privacy protection. Protecting the personal information of our students, parents, teachers, and staff is a evolving issue. The COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated the student data privacy concerns as many schools make the switch to remote or hybrid learning environments and they continue to use many of the same tools that they did during that hybrid time. According to a national study done by Learn Platform, on average, school districts have increased their ed tech tool usage since 2020 by 90% from just the previous academic year. As teachers continue to utilize the new digital programs to enhance their lessons, it is essential that the companies providing these tools are taking reasonable precautions to protect sensitive data and not to exploit it for profit. Additionally, the Senate's Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs decided to remove the reporting requirement for schools to publish which digital tools are being used. Therefore, I am introducing an amendment that would also remove the reporting requirement to ensure the House bill matches what the Senate has already moved upon. I've spoken to those who have talked about the bill, and I believe that this amendment would address their concerns. I respectfully urge a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Jones? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Jones. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 769. Now we have a local Frederick County delegation bill. Delegate Kerr will be presenting House Bill 771. Welcome, Delegate Kerr, whenever you're ready.
Oh, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Delegate Ken Kerr, representing the Frederick County delegation, presenting House Bill 771, Baltimore and Frederick County Career Exploration and Development Activities Sale of Coffee. This is a request that Frederick County be added to a bill that already active in Baltimore County that allows students with an IEP, so we're talking about students with developmental disabilities, learning disabilities, to have a career exploration coffee shop in the high schools where they can improve their social skills, learn some practical, real life experiences to just explore whether a career in the service industry, in the retail industry, and customer service would be appropriate for them. So we just simply ask that that we be permitted to have this activity in our schools in the same manner that Baltimore County schools are already permitted to do so, and we ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Kerr? Seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 771. Calling House Bill 737, Delegate Grice, and then there's one witness after Delegate Grice that will testify for 2 minutes. Welcome, Delegate Grice.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 737, what it does is establishes the Right to Learn program. The program provides scholarships for students in failing schools, and the bill defines failing schools as those schools for the last two prior years have received 2 or fewer stars under the state accountability system, which is adopted by and required by ESSA. By January 1st of each year, the local school board must provide parents of each student who attends a failing school a list of alternative options. And by April 1st, the parent must notify the board of their intent on whether or not to pursue an alternative option. The bill also codifies the BOOST program. And as I'm sure as you all very much aware, that over the past several years, the legislature has defunded the program through attrition. And so the premise behind the bill is to give parents the opportunities that they and their child deserve to obtain the best education possible. Unfortunately, under the current system, our poorest families cannot afford to give this opportunity to their children because they don't have enough money. So, Madam Chair, this bill is for the children. Thank
you. Next, Rick Tyler Jr., please, for 2 minutes. I think he just came in.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Rick Tyler. I'm the former longtime chair of the Maryland Education Coalition. And we strongly oppose this bill. It's not that we oppose non-public schools, but we oppose the use of taxpayer-supported funds for non-public, parochial, private, or home schools. We also support legislation that includes anti-discrimination and accommodation policies, and this bill does not appear to clearly address that issue. We like to remind the General Assembly that Maryland already has a plan for alternative options. It's called the Blueprint, and they're fully funded and fully implemented. Students across the state from all student groups will have access to alternative options and multiple programs, as well as a variety of student services to meet their needs. Unfortunately, it hasn't been fully funded or implemented yet. And in some school districts, historically, it has never been fully funded. So we need the General Assembly to make sure they give an opportunity to do so. We're also concerned about the use of the star rating system. We have found this to be fundamentally flawed for a variety of reasons, but one, it does not fairly measure those large schools that have multiple academic and student service programs within them. In addition, the star rating program hasn't been used for the last 2 years, and due to the pandemic and the significant increase of struggling students from all student groups across the whole state, we need to give the new policies already approved by the General Assembly opportunity to work. We believe that's the best way to meet the needs of all kids.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler.
So finally, we urge the committee to report unfavorably on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Grice or Mr. Tyler? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 737. Thank you. House Bill 753, Delegate Jones, and there's one individual testifying after you that will testify for 2 minutes. Delegate Jones.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and fellow members of the Ways and Means Committee, for the record, I am Delegate Dana Jones. I come before you today to address a critical issue that many of our districts have experienced this past fall and continue to try and manage today. For years, local school boards have struggled to recruit and retain an adequate number of school bus drivers to ensure our students have reliable transportation to school. The situation was exacerbated earlier this school year when school bus drivers left their jobs for higher paying positions with companies such as Amazon, UPS. A school bus driver is not an entry-level position. These drivers are highly skilled individuals that have met all MVA licensing requirements, including CDL Class B or A driver's license, with appropriate endorsements in addition to completing pre-service instruction, which includes classroom and on-the-road training. Becoming a school bus driver requires more qualifications in many cases than similar jobs found in the driving profession, such as driving a semi, a dump truck, neither of which require the driver to, at times, round up students. HB 753 would simply require the governor's Workforce Development Board to evaluate, study, and identify issues relating to wages paid to school bus drivers and report its findings to each county. This would help school systems make more informed decisions about how to attract and retain these desperately needed employees. I respectfully urge a favorable report on this simple bill that would help identify issues related to the school bus driver shortage. Thank you so much.
For 2 minutes, Aaron Appel, please. Is Aaron Appel in here? Okay, we will move on to questions. I see Delegate Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Delegate Jones, for bringing this legislation. Certainly, we in Charles County still continue to be impacted by decisions that are made regarding bus drivers. In the study, do you foresee working with contractors? Because the issue we have is that the bus drivers are under the contract of the contractors in turn are with the school system. And then for those that are unionized, each bus company will then be viewed as a private entity. So is that, I try looking to see whether contractors, the role they play, but are they part of the consideration of the study?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delegate Patterson.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 753. Calling House Bill 758 with Delegate Schlega, and then there's one individual signed up to testify after for 2 minutes. So Delegate Schlega, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to be before you. For the record, I am Delegate Kathy Schlega. Today, bringing before you a simple bill. I think you just heard that with the last bill. It's about public schools, lesson plans, and instructional materials, posting them on a site on the school board's website so that parents can have easier access. Why do we need this bill? Well, we know when parents are involved, students have greater academic success and increased competence. When the administration and faculty, teachers partner with parents, it creates more engagement and it has a positive impact for everyone. This simple bill will require lesson plans and instructional materials used at the public schools to be posted on the public schools website. This will give parents, family members, and tutors access to classroom materials to help our students succeed. It will remove barriers and allow parents to be involved in their children's education. I know many parents have contacted me, I'm sure as they have contacted each and every one of you, when our students were involved in virtual learning. And now that they're back in the classroom, parents want to be able to help their kids in areas that they may be struggling, or just to help them keep up on the work. And now they're not able to access that information. I know some school systems are actually doing this. And one of our colleagues has a son in a charter school in Baltimore City, and she showed me on her phone the access that she had to her son's curriculum, test scores, and everything, already being done virtually. So we know it can be done, and we know it should be done. When our kids are absent, they're struggling, they're questioning what's being taught in the classroom, access to these materials should be available for parents and tutors and grandparents. Teachers are accessing these materials electronically today. I remember when I was a classroom teacher, we got books and lesson plans and a big stack of printed materials, but today we're doing all of this virtually. It's all done online. So giving parents access to that information should not be a barrier. So I know you have other bills on this same topic today, and I hope that the Ways and Means Committee can come to consensus and pass something meaningful in this area this year. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Next, Patricia Strobel for 2 minutes, please. Is she in here? Oh, you're on mute, Ms. Strobel. There you
Okay,
go.
sorry about that. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members, for this opportunity. I'm an American mom of 3 sons. My husband and I were hardworking, honest, tax-paying citizens. Our first priority, of course, is our upbringing of our children. We'd like them to be virtuous and successful men. I ask you to please reconsider our modern educational system, namely the assumption that schools are the primary educators of our children. Instead, it is a time for us to rethink the relationship between home and school. By voting on House Bill 758, you're saying yes to the betterment of children and families. The current educational paradigm is based on schools being the primary educators. However, it is incomplete and it's not in the best interest of our children and the state if parents are not seen as the primary educators of their children. Teachers and administrators, they're very competent professionals at educating our youth. And of course, I'm very grateful for them. However, it's time for us to come together to be partners in this task of educating our children. You see, it's natural and good that children evaluate their experience and knowledge through the lens of the family. Additionally, even with the best possible schools, no school can ever educate someone in 6 hours a day for half the days of a calendar year. House Bill 758 is designed to support a teacher-parent partnership. If lesson plans and materials were accessible, it would give us the ability to discuss, enrich, and when needed, offer insight. My friend has a son over at Youth's Benefit with an IEP because of his hearing loss. She said this bill would give her the ability to be proactive in her son's education on a daily basis, thus benefiting the child, family, and teacher. There's also many Christian families who have our Lord Jesus Christ as our guide and guard along life's paths.
Ms. Strobel, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your testimony, please.
Okay, I'm just asking for consideration of a Christian worldview, sex education. We've got, things that we could teach our children. Indeed, the true lover will never use another person. We want our Christian faith to enter into our child's education. So with this bill, it'll give us a heads up to have that opportunity. We can talk about the.
Thank you. Thank you for testifying today. Are there any questions for Delegate Schlega or Ms. Strobel? Delegate Jones.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. I am trying to flip through this. Delegate Schlega, so this is for the instructional material covered under this bill. Is that material also with a copyright?
No, this bill I got from another state. I attended a conference over the summer, and a rep from another state told me they had passed this bill. And so I just used it as a model legislation, knowing it's passed and it's actually being implemented today. So I know it's legal regarding copyright, but I envision with all the bills that you're looking at today over this same topic, passing is something simpler. It is not my intention to capture teachers' individual lesson plans. This is the instructional material that as a teacher you get, that you have access to online, and then obviously you customize and you implement that, you supplement that with additional materials. I'm really just looking for the nuts and bolts of it.
Thank you. No, I think my question isn't whether it's legal or not. My question is regarding the copyrights and how local school boards would pay for the copyrights if they're going to publish that.
Well, they're already providing all of that to the students right now. So no one is going to be, you could clearly have an easy, again, they're doing this in another state, so it's not infringing on copyright laws, just easy enough to solve to say you cannot reproduce this material. But certainly when you get a book out of the library and you read it, you're not infringing on copyright laws.
No,
so
but I'm fairly certain that if we were publishing with copyright laws, we would have to just pay a fee for that. So I was just wondering and I did notice in the fiscal note that it was somewhat expensive to locals. So I was just wondering if you had talked to anyone about that or had any other information regarding how to pay for the copyrights.
No, I don't foresee it as being a
Thank you so
hurdle
much.
that can't be overcome. I think parents are worth it. If it costs a little money, pay for it to let parents have access.
So, any further questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. See you later on.
That concludes the testimony on House Bill 758. Delegate Jones and calling House Bill 750. And there are two individuals signed up to testify afterwards who will have 2 minutes each. So whenever you're ready, Delegate.
Thank you so much. Let me flip. 750. Let me take off my grandma glasses. Chairwoman Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and fellow members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Dana Jones. I come before you today, again, to testify on HB 750, the Driver's Education for Good Jobs Act. In Maryland, all new drivers must successfully complete a certified driver education program. This course includes 30 hours of classroom learning, 6 hours of behind the wheel training. These courses can cost hundreds of dollars per student. And although through Driver's Ed, it used to be included in the core curriculum of most high schools. Most Maryland schools stopped offering this course in the late 90s to early 2000s. This has pushed the burden of getting this mandated training onto individual students and their families and creating a barrier of entry to careers in driving, which often provide good wages. Although the median income for many commercial drivers is a little over $22 an hour, it's well above the minimum wage in most states, our nation is in desperate need for more qualified drivers. A recent 2021 report from the American Trucking Association indicated current shortfall is over 80,000 drivers, which is projected to increase to 100,000 by 2023. With this immense and growing lack of qualified drivers, it is no wonder that school districts across the state have been struggling to find enough school bus drivers to cover all the routes needed to get students safely to school. HB 750 would require the Career and Technical Education CTE Committee to establish a statewide career and technical education pathway for high school that helps students with obtaining a standard driver's license, enrolling and completing the course requirements associated with professional licenses, completing on-the-road training, and obtaining a commercial or specialty driver's license. This would in turn give an option for schools to offer a career pathway for students interested in pursuing a career in driving. Additionally, the bill would authorize local school systems and contractors to hire bus drivers starting at the age of 19 years and 6 months old, as long as they have at least 3 years of experience driving a vehicle. This authorization not only helps alleviate some of the pressure that school districts have been dealing with, trying to find qualified drivers, but creates an immediate job market for the recent graduates of the CTE program. This was our intention. I believe that language of the bill really does, in fact, reflect this. I respectfully urge a favorable report on this legislation that supports our students, helps remove barriers to high-paying career field, and addresses the lack of qualified drivers that has plagued our school's transportation system now for years. So thank you so very much.
Aaron Appel, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my apologies for missing the previous bill. Good afternoon, Sharon Appel on behalf of the Maryland School Bus Contractors Association, which is comprised of the private companies that contract with local school boards to own and operate school buses in Maryland. As I'm sure you're all well aware, and as Delegate Jones just mentioned, Maryland is facing a severe driver shortage, CDL driver shortage, in particular, a severe school bus driver shortage. It's not new, it's many years in the making, but it came to a head earlier this school year with driver strikes across the state. There are a number of factors contributing to the driver shortage, among them pay, inadequate pay, which Delegate Jones's previous bill addresses. The other key is training and getting applicant drivers behind the wheel as efficiently as possible while not sacrificing student safety. This bill would help the industry in 2 ways. It would establish training and a career pathway for young people to obtain a CDL in the state, which is required to drive a school bus. As one would imagine, it is far easier and quicker to get a new applicant behind the wheel of a bus if he or she already has a CDL than if they do not. It would also grant local boards of education the ability to lower the current minimum driving age of a school bus driver from 21 to 19 and a half, provided the individual has 3 or more years of regular driving experience. It's important to note the bill does not mandate a lower driving age. It merely permits local boards of ed to do so should they choose. In more rural jurisdictions in which many young people start driving large-scale farm equipment and other large vehicles early on, this might make sense. And certainly other jurisdictions could choose not to if they desired not to do so. It would further serve to expand the pool of potential drivers while not sacrificing the safety of students being transported. On behalf of the Maryland School Bus Contractors Association, thank you for your time, and I encourage a favorable report.
Thank you. Next, John Willems, please, for 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, John Willems, representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education. Thanking Delegate Jones for introducing this bill. We've already had the pleasure of testifying on the cross-file in the Senate. This is greatly appreciated to address the unprecedented school bus driver shortage and to accelerate efforts in CTE, career and technical education reforms, which are broadly intended by the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Act, the establishment of a new CTE committee, a new skills advisory committee, and a complete remaking of career technology education. This fits nicely within that framework. I would like to clarify, this is not a return to driver's ed in public schools. And there's somewhat of a myth, that we don't do it anymore in terms of there's generally access to classroom driver's ed instruction in public schools. And that is often provided through private providers of driver education, with them then providing the on-road education as well. There is a lot of financial assistance and subsidization of that. And so we feel like access to that driver's education is perhaps more equitable than is generally recognized. And we support with amendments, just pointing out that, and you'll likely hear this repeatedly with regard to the blueprint, to not be overly prescriptive or restrictive. And so requiring us to set specific goals or quotas on numbers of kids in specific programs is troubling to us. And so we would urge that provision of the bill be removed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegate or the other two folks that testified? Seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 750. Thank you. Next, calling House Bill 752, Delegate Riley, and then there are two folks testifying after Delegate Riley.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and Vice Chair Washington and members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Teresa Riley here introducing HB 752, School Psychologist Recruitment Program. School psychologists partner with families, teachers, school administrators, and other professionals to create a safe, healthy, and supportive learning environment that strengthen connections between home, school, and our community. They are a much needed resource within K to 12 school system. This bill was one that was suggested and recommended by our local school superintendents in a required report from the passage of HB 844 from 2019. Currently, Maryland has a shortage of qualified school psychologists to work in our public schools. HB 752 establishes a school psychologist recruitment program within MSDE for the purpose of recruiting, supporting, and reimbursement opportunities for professional conferences. It will also encourage people to enter the profession, become certified school psychologists, and remain in the profession so that over time, the recommended ratio of students to school psychologists will be achieved. Maryland cannot afford to wait any longer to give our students the support and the resources our school psychologists provide. There is a crisis in student behavioral and mental health issues. The teen suicide numbers in Maryland are appalling. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we have seen the drastic and tragic increase of these very issues. We must act now to ensure that our numbers go down in these situations. And I believe we owe this to our students and to our families in the state. I do want to mention that if you look at the fiscal note is pretty minimal. for, the bang for its buck, to actually do this for our students and our parents and our schools. And also I had sent to the committee, under the committee's advisement, I sent that an amendment to add Delegate Brian Crosby as a co-sponsor should this bill make it to subcommittee. So I would appreciate that you would add him as well at his request, and I respectfully request a favorable report on HB 752 and be happy to take any questions or any details about the program that's in the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, for 2 minutes, Lori Lee Mueller, please. Mueller. Miss, there you are.
Okay, sorry about that. Basically, my name is Lori Lee Mueller. I am an addict. I been clean 1,353 days. And basically, I ended up going down the slippery slope of depression and anxiety 2014, 2015, and ultimately had a mental breakdown and went to alcohol and prescription drugs to self-medicate. So this is very personal to me. I applaud Delegate Riley for her support and dedication for this bill. And I believe it's critical that we end up getting psychiatric help and mental health professionals into the school system. It's not only critical, it's time. And we also end up having a situation with COVID of where some positive stuff is coming out of it, where I think we would be able to have a recruitment be an easier form due to people wanting to reevaluate their careers and their lives and being able to help other people. I haven't really seen this energy since 9/11. And so I believe that we'd end up getting more fulfilled, significant candidates to apply for the certification by the National Associations of School Psychologists.
Thank you. Next, Cynthia Robichaud, please, for 2 minutes. Cynthia Robichaud. Okay. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 752.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, House Bill 792, Delegate Lisanti, and there are 2 individuals signed up to testify after Delegate Lisanti. So
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. It's my pleasure to bring to you House Bill 792. The purpose of as this committee is well versed, the Kerwin law established a career readiness tenet to improve the likelihood of success for all of Maryland's children. The purpose of this bill is to take a giant step forward in the implementation of this goal by requiring MSDE and MHEC to convene a work group of interested stakeholders to develop policies and procedures for identifying students who may benefit from dual enrollment in non-credit credentialing programs. The bill is necessary as it will help local school systems and community colleges work out the administrative details that exist with fund transfers and policy conflicts. The legislation also authorizes a career credential pilot program so that jurisdictions can learn from one another and prioritize local implementation. I'm pleased to report to you today that MSDE and MHEC have reported that the goals of this bill can be accomplished using existing resources. Therefore, there was no fiscal impact. However, I must add that the positive impact of this bill is significant and life-changing. Acquisition of a skill, trade, or professional license for many is the pathway to self-sustainability. House Bill 792 is timely in that MSDE has recently hired a specialist to concentrate on dual enrollment opportunities. So this is a perfect time to convene the appropriate stakeholders to ensure prompt implementation. So for those reasons, I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 792. Thank you, Madam Chair.
next, Teresa Felder, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Teresa Felder, and I am the president of Harford Community College. I am testifying today in support of House Bill 792 to establish a work group of interested stakeholders to establish a career credential jumpstart pilot program. By testifying today, I'm advocating for Maryland high school students who are interested in an alternative to our traditional credit education pathways. Historically in Maryland, less than 70% of graduating seniors attend college. We have an opportunity to provide the other 30% of students who have not traditionally attended college with educational options while they are still in high school. These opportunities to learn skills and earn credentials will help them enter highly skilled, living wage careers in highly sought after employment fields. Community colleges are poised and fully equipped to support this group of students by providing an alternative pathway that allows them to obtain career and professional certifications and licenses that lead directly into employment. Harford Community College is proud of our longstanding partnership with Harford County Public Schools and our strong relationships with local employers. These relationships provide us with insight into the needs of our local business community and also allow us to quickly create training to meet industry needs. As Maryland's largest workforce trainer, community colleges are equipped to offer students career training in more than 100 areas and career pathways. In today's economy, many graduating seniors cannot afford to invest in a college education. House Bill 792 will establish pathways that enable our students to jumpstart their careers with the credentials they need to quickly begin working in high-demand employment fields. I fully support the creation of a work group to examine the logistics of establishing the Career Credential Jumpstart pilot program, and I ask for your favorable support of this bill. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. And Delegate Sean Bolson was signed up to testify, but we don't see him in the waiting room. So are there any questions for the delegate or Dr. Felder? Delegate Patterson.
Press the button too quickly. Thank you very much for this legislation proposal. Delegate Lasanti, I'm really excited about it and want to know, you used the word singular pilot program. Are you proposing that the work group look at one program or several?
Actually, I was not prescriptive in the bill. Basically, what I want to happen is for all the stakeholders that are involved in providing education and these credentialing programs to come together and figure out the logistics. If that, I wanted to give a little bit of latitude if they want to start a pilot program. Mm-hmm. For instance, in Harford County, our community college and our public school system are starting to do that. So I want other school systems to be able to learn from some of the experiences that we have on the ground.
All right, thank you. Mm-hmm. I'll speak with you offline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 792. Calling Delegate Branch, House Bill 685, and there are 3 individuals after the delegate sign up to testify for 2 minutes each. So Delegate Branch, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Chanel Branch, and I come to you to ask for your support for House Bill 685, Regional Resource Centers and Libraries funding. This committee is well aware of the importance of public libraries, but I want to give a few statistics. In fiscal year 2020, our Maryland libraries circulated over 44 million items, had over 17 million library visits, and facilitated over 5 million reference transactions. Once the pandemic began, libraries increased e-material holdings by 32% to provide remote access to books and information, provided over 10,000 hours of contactless services, including material pickups, printing, and reference services. They saw a 13% increase in circulation of ebooks and other downloadable materials, and had over 63,000 patrons to reach out for contactless services. My last statistic is that there are well over 3 million registered library users, and we are nearing 60% of the population of Maryland holding library cards. All of these statistics just drive home the importance of our libraries to Marylanders and the importance of keeping them operational. House Bill 685 with amendments will give our local libraries and regional resource centers a much-needed increase in funding over 4 fiscal years beginning in fiscal year 2024. Our libraries are facing real fiscal challenges, and now more than ever, we need our libraries, and now more than ever, they need our help. I have one amendment that I'm offering to correct the drafting error, and I would like to also mention that the cross-file to this bill just passed out of the Senate. So therefore, I respectfully ask and request a favorable report on House Bill 685 with amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Branch. Next, for 2 minutes, John Vendita, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Washington, and committee members. My name is John Vendetta, and I'm respectfully asking for a favorable report on this bill. I am the director of the Eastern Shore Regional Library. Maryland's 3 regional resource centers exist solely to serve our rural member libraries. Of the 14 library systems supported by regional resource centers, 9 of these counties are ranked in the lower half of Maryland counties in per capita income. This means that many of these counties must make difficult funding decisions that may negatively impact a library's local funding. Maryland's regional resource centers strategically leverage our funding in order to free up precious dollars for our member library systems. Much of this is done using economies of scale, for instance, purchasing subscription databases, streaming media, and IT hardware and software at the regional level. Another strategy that we use to help our member libraries is partnering with the Maryland State Library for federal grants. ESRL is currently managing an ARPA grant of $100,000 to develop facilities master plans for 9 rural counties. These costly plans are required in order for a library system to apply for capital grants. I know I speak for my colleagues in Western Maryland and Southern Maryland when I say how thankful we are for your support of libraries through the years. HB 685 allows us to continue the work of helping our member libraries provide essential services and educational opportunities to Maryland citizens. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next, Carrie Wilson, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. Thank you for your time today. My name is Carrie Wilson, Executive Director of Calvert Library. I'm also here today representing the Maryland Association of Public Library Administrators and the Maryland Library Association, asking you to return a favorable report for HB 685. The bill under consideration will put incremental funding increases in place for the coming years. And as you heard from Delegate Branch and Mr. Vendetta, and as you'll hear from Ms. Akins in a moment, the public libraries and the regional resource centers play vital roles in our communities. I'm going to give you a very brief context as to why future increases are important as we work to sustain existing services and expand access and equity in our libraries. In fiscal 2023, when there is no scheduled increase for either public libraries or the regional resource centers, 8 of the 24 public library systems will have decreased state funding. In most cases, it's due to a shift in population from the last census. Of these 8, 2 are in Southern Maryland, 2 in Western Maryland, 3 on the shore, and the 8th is the City of Baltimore's Enoch Pratt Free Library. Flat funding for the regional resource centers also means a funding decrease for the Eastern Shore Regional Library. As you all know, despite changes in population or incremental increases in county wealth, the rural counties and the City of Baltimore are the areas in most need in our state, and they're the least able to manage budget shortfalls. So we thank you very sincerely for the historical support you've shown to public and regional libraries as fundamental pieces of the education landscape in Maryland. I thank you very much for your consideration and your continued support of Maryland libraries through a favorable report on HB 685.
Next, from the great county of Howard, Tanya Akins, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and distinguished committee members, I am Tanya Akins, President and CEO of Howard County Library System, respectfully requesting your support of HB 685, Education, Regional Resource Centers, and Libraries funding. The bill, as you've heard, will extend per capita increases for regional resource centers and public libraries through fiscal year 27. These funding increases will help sustain the important work being done in your local communities, especially as libraries aid in recovery from the pandemic. Howard County Library System continues to play a critical role in addressing the digital divide for the approximately 3,300 households in the county without broadband internet access. Our laptop and hotspot lending program enables disconnected adults and seniors to gain access to digital lifelong learning resources, gainful employment, health information, and access to civic and cultural participation. Our role is just as critical in providing supports for the more than 57,000 K-12 students served by our library. Our library provides every student an A+ student account, giving them access to books and ebooks, free online homework help, and online resources for assignments and out-of-school learning. We're committed and intentional about reducing barriers to learning. Aligning with the Building Lifelong Learners Act, we instituted fine-free borrowing for customers of all ages. We know how much our community needs and relies on our libraries. During the pandemic, use of ebooks increased 71%, and we filled an average of 1,700 contactless pickup requests every single day. We lent sewing machines to aid in the production of face masks and gowns, and partnered with the Indian Cultural Association to distribute over 2 million pounds of food from library parking lots. We're hard at work in your communities, and we respectfully ask a favorable report for HB 685. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 685. Moving right along, Delegate Jackson, my apologies, sir. I skipped you inadvertently. Calling Delegate Jackson, House Bill 665, and there are 3 folks after you who will have 2 minutes each to testify, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Jackson here in support of HB 665, Public Schools Air Quality Testing Posting Online. This bill will require that a local school board does an indoor air quality test in a public school. This bill would require that if a local school board does an indoor air quality test in a public school, that they then must post the results of the test on both the local school board website and on the Maryland State Department of Education website. It is important to note that this bill does not mandate that indoor air quality tests be performed, but only that if such an air quality test is deemed necessary by the local school board, that the results are made available to the general public, and especially to the parents. Unfortunately, this bill has come about as a reaction to a situation that occurred in a school in my district. There was a credible report of mold made by a teacher who will be testifying today as well. And essentially, little was done about it for nearly 7 months. Even once the tests were performed, parents and school staff still had no way to access them in order to find out how bad the problem was or if the problem had been properly addressed. This is a simple transparency bill aimed at ensuring that there is easy access to information online regarding any possible health risks that might be present in the air that students and school staff are breathing in while in school. I humbly request a favorable report on HB 665. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Maureen Hall, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. 2 reasons.
Oh, we can't hear you, Ms. Hall. You're not muted. No. When you started, I could hear you. That's better.
2 reasons why House Bill 665. Can you hear me now? Is that all right?
Minnie, can you hear? It's still not that great.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. 2 reasons why House Bill 665 should be passed. The first reason is personal. Having worked in a building with poor air quality for several years, I know firsthand how poor air can affect your health. Having spent the last 4 years dealing with health issues ranging from daily migraines, asthma, bacterial overgrowth, immune and adrenal dysfunction, and now currently pancreatic insufficiency. The second reason I hope that House Bill 665 is passed is that 2/3 of the Baltimore school buildings were built during the 1950s and the 1960s. During the construction, asbestos was used to insulate and protect against fire. Over time, this breaks down and the buildings have and breaks down in the building. In the case of our building, we had air conditioning put in 2016, opening up these air conditioning vents, just making me wonder what was blowing through the vents. We were also told during that period of time when this was being installed that we should take home any personal belongings because the contractor was worried that he would have to do asbestos abatement. This white powdery stuff was all over the wrap, was all over the food, cans, and clothing in the pantry I work with in the basement. City schools also have these issues. In 2020, a report from the Johns Hopkins University reported that 95 buildings had issues stemming from no heat, no air, and HVAC systems that needed to be replaced. This really makes you wonder what do we, as teachers, we are breathing in. And more importantly, Hopkins also found that 1.5 million hours of instruction time was lost due to these issues. State law requires that the Interagency Commission on School Construction tests schools annually. I think this House Bill 665 should work together with the IAC to bring these schools up to date. And in conclusion, I believe with the county executive, every child, every teacher deserves a modern, safe, and a supportive learning environment. I believe this can happen according to July 14th report from the Baltimore County Public School that $2.5 billion will be used to construct new schools and fix and help with remaining future projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Sam Zwerling, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Samantha Zwerling, here with the Maryland State Education Association, representing our 75,000 educators from across the state. MSEA supports this bill and thanks Delegate Jackson for all of his work on this with our 2 locals in Baltimore County to work on this bill. There's been a lot of focus on air quality in our schools lately. Even just this morning, MSEA participated in a press conference with some members of the General Assembly to support related legislation from Delegate Solomon establishing the Safe School Indoor Air Program. Air quality issues in our schools have led to school closings in Prince George's counties, positive tests for mold in Howard County, grievances filed by educators, and unsafe conditions for students and educators. In a 2018 grievance filed by educators in Baltimore County, the arbiter concluded that the Board of Education failed to maintain a safe and healthy environment in the school, and the board failed to undertake a timely inspection of the mold problem by qualified staff. So this bill requires boards of education to have an air quality inspector on retainer and would allow them to respond to these concerns at a quicker pace. Educators feel like their concerns aren't heard and they are put into unsafe situations. This bill would engender more trust in that process between educators and administrators. By requiring the air quality assessment results to be posted online, it would bring greater transparency to the concerns from faculty, staff, and students around the air quality in their schools. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought a greater focus on air quality issues, and the community has a right to know these results so they are able to effectively advocate for solutions. This statewide bill reinforces the idea that all children and educators deserve to learn and work in safe and healthy school environments, regardless of their zip codes. MSEA urges a favorable report on House Bill 665, and we appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, John Willems, please, for 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, John Willems, representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education. Unfortunately, here today to testify in opposition to House Bill 665, primarily for the reason that the bill would appear to, while making indoor air quality assessments discretionary in the instances when they are conducted, require that they be conducted by outside contractors. We defend the professionalism and qualifications of our school maintenance staff. I will say while understaffed and underfunded and overstressed and overworked through COVID, they are conducting an awful lot of indoor air quality assessments and responding through facilities maintenance to those issues and concerns. And recognizing that if the bill were then to be fixed related to the outside contractor issue, would it then require that all of these routine assessments of indoor air quality be posted not only on the local school system site, but also forwarded to MSDE for posting on their site. And so it's an issue of implementation in-house versus outside, and the cost issues that would raise, and then the scope of the publication of the results. And would say that the federal guidelines from EPA do promote transparency, do promote community-based approach to monitoring and responding to indoor air quality, including teachers and parents using checklists, something called Tools for Schools. They also warn against publishing the results to create confusion or the results being posted essentially after the issue has been addressed. And so the timing issue of that data relative to addressing the actual problem and condition in the school. So for those reasons, we request an unfavorable report on House Bill 665. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee?
Madam Vice Chair, can I say, Madam Chair, I'm sorry. Can I make a respond to Mr. Woolham's? Yes.
Go ahead, Delegate Jackson.
So in the bill, it reads, each county board shall retain the services of a qualified indoor air quality investigator to conduct any air quality testing the board chooses to have conducted in a public school in the county. So it does not say you have to bring in an outside person. Some of our schools do have, and what the committee has, and this is the committee language, are qualified indoor air quality investigators already on staff. So I'm not sure where Mr. Woolham's is getting that from, but that's not what the bill says. If a school chooses to have someone on staff to handle this, that is okay with this bill.
Thank you, Delegate. Seeing no questions, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 665. Thank you, Delegate Jackson. Next, House Bill 725, Delegate Lukey, and there are 3 folks for 2 minutes who will follow Delegate Lukey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief because this bill is very straightforward. There is a class of early childhood program known as a therapeutic childcare program, and these are highly specialized programs that focus on supporting students with disabilities, developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, delays in their social and emotional functioning. And this bill simply creates a funding stream with a per pupil amount and a gradual increase in that per pupil amount to account for inflation, to make sure these fantastic programs that we have in the state have the funding they need to continue providing the services that they provide under this proven model. So I would ask the committee for a favorable report.
So, Stephen Quam for 2 minutes, but I don't see him in here. So I will move on to Clinton McSherry, please, for 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, honorable members, good afternoon. My name is Clinton McSherry, and I'm the Director of Public Policy at Maryland Family Network. I appreciate the opportunity to be here in strong support of House Bill 725. You have my written testimony, so I'll be very brief as well. Madam Chair, I submit to you that this legislation represents an investment in better outcomes for at-risk children, as well as cost-saving measures for the state. As recently as 2020, researchers found that 4 out of 5 children who moved from therapeutic nursery into the school system moved to mainstream classrooms and maintained that social emotional gains that they accomplished through the therapeutic nurseries through 2nd grade. This documented success in transitioning children to typical education placements not only improves their outcomes, but also saves the major costs associated with more intensive special education services. So for these reasons, Madam Chair, Maryland Family Network respectfully requests your favorable consideration of this legislation.
Thank you. Jimmy Venza, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members, and thank you for the opportunity to come before you in strong support of this important therapeutic child care legislation. Special thanks to Delegate Lukey for your leadership and energizing visit to the Laurie Center to actually see a therapeutic child care in action. Dr. Jimmy Venza, clinical psychologist and executive director of the Laurie Center's Children for Social Emotional Wellness in Rockville. Laurie Center is one of our nation's home for infant and early childhood mental health care. And I'm also delighted to represent two other nationally recognized institutions that are part of our Maryland's fabric for early childhood care, Kennedy Krieger and the ARC. Each of our programs provides intensive childcare and education supports for our most vulnerable infants, young children, and families, all who face great adversity. It looks a little different. It could be children with complex developmental disabilities like autism, physical health and complex medical needs, and children experiencing trauma and mental health challenges, all leading to safety concerns, disruptions in learning, and that require intensive family supports and specialized multidisciplinary teams of educators, health, and mental health experts. These programs also support the early childhood workforce and conduct research that spreads best practice around the state and country. At the same time, these services face chronic underfunding and are ever at risk for budget cuts and reductions in care for our families. So we're urging you today for a favorable report on House Bill 725 so that 2022 legislative session will be actually remembered as the moment when our state unites with our families to establish in law specialized care with sustained funding. And by doing so, you'll ensure the access to the specialized care and young children to meet their full potential. Thank you for all your efforts and great gratitude for your service on behalf of our children, families, and community.
Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 725. Moving on to House Bill 766, Delegate Kaiser, and there are 7 folks after Delegate Kaiser who will testify for 2 minutes each. Delegate Kaiser, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm just looking here. I know that my intern, there she is on the screen. I will introduce her, Carolina Colstead, who's my intern this session, who was a student of mine last semester in both of my classes. And she's interning and she did the work on this bill. It is a complex bill and I look forward to some future conversations, but I'm going to turn it over to Carolina.
Thank you, Delegate. Members of the Ways and Means Committee, it is my pleasure to come before you and offer testimony in favor of House Bill 766. This bill aims to level the field of accessibility to youth with high-intensity psychiatric and behavioral health conditions through authorizing local mental health agencies to approve funding for educational costs incurred at residential treatment centers or RTCs. Under our current system, an individual education plan or an IEP determines the course a child and their family must embark on to establish the cost they will incur at an RTC. If a child's IEP approves them for a non-public special education plan, educational costs in an RTC are covered by their local school system. However, if an IEP does not specify this need for placement, the educational funding is often covered by signing onto a voluntary placement agreement or a VPA. This agreement entails giving up custody of one's child and agreeing to monthly child support payments of up to $2,000 to maintain the child's placement. The cost and extent of the VPA process prevents many families from getting their children the help they need for debilitating psychiatric and behavioral health conditions simply because that child does not have a specified IEP. This bill attempts to make treatment more accessible through redirecting the approval of funding for educational costs incurred at RTCs to the local behavioral health authorities. This change prevents the need for families to enter VPAs and relieves the financial and emotional burden associated with the current process. This minor change as to what agency is able to approve funding majorly alters access to these resources with minimal expenses incurred. Implementation of this bill will bring forth an equitable and necessary change to ensure that all children in the state of Maryland receive the same access to a free and appropriate education. The educational component of an RTC is paramount in ensuring that while a child is undergoing treatment for a severe mental health condition or psychiatric disorder, they are still able to receive the same educational opportunities as they would in the public school system. In considering that a core component preventing adolescents from having access to these resources is that financial obligation tied to the VPA process, and that this burden can be alleviated through allowing the local behavioral health authorities to approve the educational funding, it speaks for itself the benefit this bill provides. Not only will it increase accessibility to necessary mental health treatment, but it ensures that all Maryland children receive equitable opportunities to learn without a financial barrier. I urge a favorable report on House Bill 766. Thank you.
Next, Reagan Vaughn, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Regan Vaughn. I'm the Director of Advocacy for Catholic Charities of Baltimore, here today in support of HB 766. I'd like for you to indulge me for a minute and imagine that you're married with 3 children, and one of your children has intense behavioral health needs. You've tried therapy, you've tried in-home services, you've had emergency room visits, your child's had an inpatient hospital stay, your marriage is strained, your other children are affected by the turmoil. Basically, your whole house is in crisis. And so your child's treatment team tells you that their clinical recommendation is for your child to enter a residential treatment center. You've dreaded getting to this point, but you know it's what needs to happen. So you say, well, what do I need to do? And you're told you have to call the Department of Social Services to get the process started. Confused, you ask why DSS? And that's when you're told that while your insurance will cover the medical expenses of the stay, it won't cover the educational expenses. You will need to voluntarily surrender physical custody of your child to the child welfare system and enter into a voluntary placement agreement. So you call DSS and you're told that you're going to be responsible for the clothing and needs of your child. You're going to have an obligation to pay child support. DSS is going to do a home study. You'll go before a local care team. And if your child needs to stay more than 180 days, there'll be court appearances. Your child will get a lawyer. You may or may not, depending on your income. And so you decide to accept the conditions. You fill out the paperwork. You go before the local care team. And then maybe you get approved for the VPA. Only about half of all requested VPAs are approved. Only then can your child be admitted for the psychiatric treatment that he or she needs. Can you imagine if we did this to parents of cancer patients or other somatic diseases? There is a better way, and this bill proposes that way. Children with behavioral health issues should be served by the behavioral health system. We should take child welfare out of this process and leave it up to our local behavioral health authorities to work with families and to approve the educational costs for children in residential treatment. I urge the committee to support HB 766. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Celia Serkin, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairwoman and the respective members of the Ways and Means Committee. I am Celia Serkin, Executive Director of the Family Support Organization serving parents who have children, youth, or young adults with behavioral health challenges. We have a strong and long history of working with parents whose youth needed RTC level of care for clinical reasons. We are here to support House Bill 766, and we believe strongly that this bill will eliminate the inequitable way that youth without non-public placements on their IEP or not in special education at all have been treated when needing to be placed in RTC for clinical reasons. We are in a very different place than we were when BPAs were first developed. We have parity legislation. We have many, many efforts to strengthen parity in behavioral health that didn't exist when VPA was first established. And this gives opportunities to families with private insurance. So there is no reason at this point in time to have this inequity in having 2 pathways for youth who have similar clinical needs because of their behavior challenges to attain RTC level of care. In addition to this inequitable treatment, we are very concerned about families who are approved for VPA having to pay child support. Family expenses, rent, mortgage, car payments, utility bills do not decrease when a child is in RTC. In addition, many families are still experiencing food and financial insecurities during an inflationary period when prices for food, gas, and many other items are increasing. Families already went through induced recession during which many lost jobs and could not pay their rent. And we still have many families we work with who owe their landlord back due rent. And many pandemic-related relief programs have ended. In addition, we are concerned that those who never get a VPA for a variety of reasons then go on and actually relinquish custody. They go through a SINA. We strongly urge you to support this bill. We appreciate your ongoing commitment to Maryland youth with behavioral health needs and their families in Maryland. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, Ann Geddes, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Ann Geddes. I'm the Director of Public Policy at the Maryland Coalition of Families. MCF provides family peer support to families caring for a child or other loved one with behavioral health needs, and I'm here in support of House Bill 766. The bill would remove the requirement that parents and caregivers with a child on Medicaid who needs RTC level of psychiatric care but does not have a non-public school placement on an individualized education plan do a voluntary placement agreement and have their child enter the child welfare system. Under the current system, the dollars to pay for the education placement in an RTC come from state general funds and run through the Department of Human Services. The bill provides that these dollars should rightly run through the Department of Health. It is a matter of accessing psychiatric treatment and not a matter of child abuse or neglect. Two mothers, both single moms, have submitted written testimony today. They both had to go through the VPA process in order to access the psychiatric treatment that their child needed in an RTC simply because their child did not have a non-public school placement. I urge you to look at their testimony. In addition, one mother that I interviewed never actually had the VPA approved, but was told instead that she should report herself to DSS and relinquish custody of her child into the state in order to access services. The current process is a nightmare for families. It typically takes many months, and these families are in crisis now. Some of these kids are those who are cycling in and out of emergency departments and hospitals while they are waiting for a VPA to be approved. Some of those are kids who are stuck in inpatient hospital units for months waiting for approval so that they can enter an RTC because they are not safe to be in the home. Families must enter the child welfare system, have a home study done, agree to pay child support, and we have heard of amounts of $1,500 to $2,000 a month for a middle class family, and go to court if their child needs to stay in an RTC longer than 180 days. DSS workers are tasked with making a psychiatric determination. This decision rightly rests with the local behavioral health authorities who are now making that determination for a child that does have a non-public school placement.
Geddes, could you wrap up your testimony, please?
Yes, certainly. That's what I have, and I urge you to support the bill. Thanks very much.
Next, Margot Quinlan, please, for 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Margot Quinlan with the Mental Health Association of Maryland. We're here in support of this bill, along with our Children's Behavioral Health Coalition. We really appreciate this opportunity and really just want to lift up the fact that this bill is about increasing access to treatment and reducing barriers to care. Currently, as you've heard, families are facing undue barriers to entering their children into medically necessary residential treatment centers. This has the adverse effects of long hospital overstays, backlogs of youth and families waiting on treatment beds, and ultimately creates a dangerous situation for youth in a time of crisis. We see this as a very simple administrative fix that will have a significant positive impact on children and their families. This is ultimately about making government more efficient and making behavioral health treatment more accessible for youth. We would urge a favorable report on this bill, along with the sponsor amendments that were put in conversations with some other partners doing this work in the field. So we thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Next, Robert Bassler, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Robert Bassler. I am the Associate Vice President for Arrow Child and Family Ministries. I'm also the Public Policy Chair for the Maryland Association of Resources for Families and Youth. MARFI is an association of private child caring organizations providing more than 200 programs to children in need throughout the state. I'm here to urge you to support House Bill 766. As you've heard, the current funding scheme requires families to place their kids in foster care in order to access medically necessary mental health treatment. Whether or not a child must use child welfare system should not depend on whether a child has a non-public educational placement in their IEP. The child welfare system is designed to protect youth who suffer from abuse and neglect. It is not designed for, nor is it appropriate for families who are trying to access mental health care for their children. Additionally, it asks for an already overtasked child welfare system to serve families it was not intended to serve. We are in a child mental health crisis. Maryland's families and youth should be able to access behavioral health treatment that they need when they need it. Their educational status should not dictate the path they need for treatment. And for these reasons, I ask you to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Megan Collins, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Megan Jones. I accidentally signed up under my maiden name. I am a staff attorney with Disability Rights Maryland, the protection and advocacy organization for the state of Maryland. DRM is part of a national network of similar agencies, and our mission is to advocate for the legal rights of people with disabilities throughout the state. DRM supports House Bill 766. As you've heard, the Maryland State Department of Education and local school systems cover the cost of the educational component of residential treatment center placement when a child's IEP notes an educational requirement for a non-public special education school. However, if a child or youth does not attend a non-public special education school and does not need that level of intensity of service for educational reasons, but does require the residential treatment center for medical or psychiatric reasons, parents have no option other than to seek voluntary placement of their child with the Department of Human Services. And they must give up physical custody of their child in order to obtain approval for the funding of the educational costs of the placement. This means that depending on a child's IEP status, their family may be disrupted by the intrusion of a local social services department. House Bill 766 will remedy this inequity and ensure that children who need residential treatment center placement for non-educational reasons have their education costs administered by the Maryland Department of Health and not the Department of Human Services, and will allow these students to receive the services they need without requiring their parents to place them with the Department of Human Services. DRM asks you to support House Bill 766.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 766. Thank you. Next, House Bill 547, Delegate Guyton, and there are 5 individuals after Delegate Guyton to testify for 2 minutes each. So whenever you're ready, Delegate.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Again, for the record, Delegate Michelle Guyton, District 42B, Baltimore County. And I do have 4 bills in a row for you today. I hope I can get extra credit if I keep them straight. I will try to go as quickly as I can while giving you the information that hopefully will make sure that this is clear. In addition, I would just ask you in response, if there are things that are not clear or you have questions about the bill, I do hope that you will ask. And so we make sure we're on the same page. So the first bill is House Bill 547. I thank you for your consideration of this. This is the Non-Visual Access Accountability Act for Education. You heard this bill last year. The bill has been worked extensively, particularly on the Senate side this year. The cross-file for this bill is Senator Zucker. And with the Senate President's office, they've made quite a few changes, but it generally does the same thing that it did before. And we know that virtual learning exposed a lot of holes in our educational system, but particularly when it came to the provision of appropriate accessibility for students with disabilities over virtual learning. So blind students, for obvious reasons, have been particularly impacted by the lack of assistive technologies and equitable access to educational programming over these past 2 years. And this is despite the fact that there are clear requirements in federal law for us to provide them. This really isn't optional for us. So many students have been unable to participate in specific classes or activities because the technologies that are purchased by the jurisdictions don't interface with the non-visual accessibility platforms on their computers or that are accessible to them. So there are blind students in Howard County, for instance, who are unable to do high school math classes because they use a program called GeoGebra that's not accessible to them. And other students there have trouble participating in some classes on a program called Kahoot because it requires them to see color in order to answer the questions correctly. So that's just a few different situations to illustrate it for you. We also sent a video out to everyone, and I believe Maryland Federation for the Blind did as well, to illustrate this with real life children on real life platforms. So hopefully all of you did take the time to watch that. So House Bill 547 puts disability accountability measures in place during the procurement process for digital technologies. It requires the vendors, not the individual local school systems, to submit an accessibility conformance report demonstrating how their technology complies with accessibility standards. It also puts a lot of technical assistance in place for the counties to be able to make sure that they are getting the right sorts of bids from the right sorts of vendors for this accessible platforming. So I'm happy to answer questions. I do have some folks here that want to say a little bit more about the bill, and I ask for your favorable report. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And now to one of my favorite constituents, Sharon Minneke, please, for 2 minutes. Sharon, I know I saw you're on here. Sharon, you have to unmute. Okay, Delegate Guyton, I'll come back to her, okay?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. We'll get in touch with her as well.
Okay, thanks. Derek Day, please, then, for 2 minutes. Oh, they're saying, I see. Technical issues, 1 second, please. As my old chair of my old committee used to say, 1 moment, please. We need some elevator music right now.
Are you able to unmute them?
We're working on that.
I can ask them to unmute, but I can't unmute them.
Yeah, you can only ask. That's right.
Okay.
Okay,
This may be a great illustration of how difficult accessing technology can be for.
So I will go to Jonathan Lazar. Then, thank you for 2 minutes, Mr. Lazar.
Hi there. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and distinguished members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Jonathan Lazar. I'm a professor at the University of Maryland, and I'm also director of the Trace Research and Development Center at the university, the nation's oldest research center on technology and disability. But of course, I'm here representing my own opinion, not that of the University of Maryland or the Trace Center. I am strongly in favor of this bill. Why? It's both a cost savings bill and a civil rights bill, right? It protects the rights of students with disabilities to have equal access to technology for learning. And also it takes the responsibility off of for fixing technology off of local school boards and puts it where it should be, on the technology vendor. This saves time and money for school boards. This makes sure that students with disabilities have equal access to education. So it's a great bill. Now, you may hear from some people who say, well, we don't know that vendors can do this, right? We didn't know that all these requirements can be met. And I want you to think about this. We have in our hearts, we have these warm places, these warm memories of school as being this unique place with great teachers and supportive administrators. But from a technology procurement point of view, there is nothing special about schools. Schools procure technology and can procure technology the same way that universities do, the same way that state government does, the same way that federal government does. All of these protections that are in the bill are things that technology vendors already know how to do. Tech vendors already can do this. They can meet the requirements, right? So all of the procurement requirements in the bill, vendors know how to do, and they already are used successfully in all these other situations. So I support this bill because all it does is apply the same techniques that we already know vendors can do to the K-12 schools. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have.
Next, Dominique Sanders, please, for 2 minutes. Is Is Dominique on?
Dominique Sanders is not here.
Okay, thank you. John Willems, please, for 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, John Willems, representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, here today to testify in support of House Bill 547 for all the reasons articulated by Delegate Guyton and Mr. Lazar, Professor Lazar. We do support the bill with amendments. We have worked during the interim with particularly the Senate President's Office on this legislation. The bill has been heard in the Senate, and we are corresponding on amendments as we speak. Those amendments are described in MABE's rather lengthy written testimony. One issue that I believe remains outstanding relates to the bill's reference to fully and equally accessible technology, which we believe is incongruous with the rest of the bill, which refers to ensuring accessibility for students that calls on an evaluation basically for functionally equivalent access. And so they're different standards. We worry about one part of the bill saying functionally equivalent and another part saying same, equal, fully, and those, again, incongruous standards. We also request that the indemnification clause apply not only to the state, but to local contracts consistent with Mr. Lazar's testimony, and we look forward to that being resolved. We are concerned about the teacher-developed products having to meet an accessible standard for all students, certainly teachers with students requiring accessibility needs, and that those standards be met would be required to do so. But as a general standard, it might be overbroad. So those are some of the issues we identify in our testimony, and we look forward to working with the committee toward this bill passing with some amendments that we believe make it more practicable and workable, but in no way strip the bill of its core intent to ensure accessibility. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try Sharon Minneke again. Okay, Derek Day.
Madam Chair, they both say they're on, but they're unable to unmute themselves. And they went out and came back in and they're still unable to unmute. So I don't know.
Lazar, you can do that. Yes. So okay. Mr. Lazar is
I'm going to call her right back then. I'll try and see if I could figure out her, you know, when you're a computer scientist, you always try and solve everyone's tech problems.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
They've been on the phone with my chief as well. Well, thank you all for your patience.
Okay. So I've got Sharon here. Sharon, can you speak and can they hear you?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Sharon. This is Vanessa Atterbury. Thank you. I apologize.
Thank you, Chairman Atterbury. Thank you.
Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Me too. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you to Delegate Guyton for sponsoring this bill for us. You know, accessibility is. I'm intrigued by this comment made by my friend over there in the School Board Association, because he said accessibility it can be for the students who need it. Now, I want to ask you, how many of you have ever used the ramp to get into your building there, the low house office building? I'm sure if you were to have a show of hands that sometimes many of you do, whether you need it or not, right? So you don't know when you need accessibility. And so to say that kind of a statement is a lack of understanding of accessibility. You know, the guidelines for vendors have been around since 1995. That's a long time. They know how to do it. One other comment on the fiscal note, there's a thing in there where Baltimore City says that they have to hire somebody to help the vendors do their conformance report, conformance for accessibility. Well, that doesn't make sense, because if you know how to make accessibility, which they should know, and if they don't, then do you really want their contract? So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. I think this bill will go a long way in correcting the misunderstanding, and it will bring accountability on the part of the locals and MSDE. It'll bring consequences to the vendors who would like to forget about accessibility, and it will bring transparency to the public, because the reports will be on the MSD website. So we ask you to give this bill a favorable position. Vote yes. Thank you. Sorry about the delay.
Thank you. Delegate Guyton, can we do the same thing with Mr. Day, perhaps?
Certainly.
Everyone, just your indulgence, please.
Thank you so much. And while we're waiting for my assistant to get him on the phone, if I could speak to the fiscal note, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, because last year this bill did have a very high fiscal note. This year's fiscal note, however, is minimal. State effect is none. Local effect expenditures for some school systems may increase minimally, and small business effect only for those that provide digital tools in order to be accessible. So she may have been referring to last year.
Thank you. And while we're waiting, I want to thank Mr. Laser for pinch hitting there and helping us out. Appreciate that.
You're a computer scientist. Even when you become a professor at heart, you still want to solve everyone's tech problems. So my pleasure.
Madam Chair, I apologize. I don't think we're able to get him on the phone. So if anyone has questions for him, please do read the testimony. I believe there's written testimony as well.
Okay. We apologize for our technical difficulties, Mr. Day.
Sharon,
Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry.
I think we could have, I figured we could have them exit, and then I can unmute participants upon entry and see if that works.
Okay, so Mr. Day, if you heard that, could you please exit and then come back in? So okay. So let's just, one moment, please.
Okay, he's coming back on now. I don't think it worked. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he has to be on unmute himself when he comes in to use the unmute, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will just ask the committee to, because we're not sure if we have the correct number, so we don't want to call a stranger. So I will ask the committee to just please take a look at his written testimony and we'll move on. Are there any questions for the delegate or any of the folks who came to testify? Okay, thank you again very much. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 547.
Madam Chair, did John Williams testify? John Williams
Yes,
testify?
yep,
He did?
yep.
Okay,
Thank you, Haley.
thank you.
Now calling House Bill 657 and Delegate Guyton, and there are 5 individuals after Delegate Guyton who will testify, and I'm turning this over to the Vice Chair. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Chair, depending on if you've switched yet. Again, I really appreciate your patience on that last one. Hope it doesn't bode ill for the rest of my testimony today, but right now I'm here to present again Delegate Michelle Guyton from District 42B, Baltimore County, House Bill 657, and ask for your favorable report on this bill. This bill is designed to assist the consortium that was put into place by the blueprint legislation to establish guidelines to our 24 systems for the student questionnaire that is filled out by parents or guardians at the beginning of every school year. There is a lot of misunderstanding about this bill, so I will say simply this bill puts into place a behavioral health advisory group to work with the members of the consortium on coordinated community supports already established to help develop the types of questions that need to be asked on the behavioral health questionnaires. One of the big misconceptions about this bill is the fact that the word screening is in it anywhere. The reason that the word screening is there is because that is the term that was used in the blueprint when it referred to what we really meant to say, I believe, after talking a lot with Alistair, is the questionnaire that schools are already giving out. And just for an example of why this is important, you have actually been sent different questionnaires from different counties and some of your information. I won't call any out. I definitely won't call the ones that aren't doing a great job out. I will say that Baltimore City and Howard County have fabulous inter-student behavioral health questionnaires. They ask everything from, has the child had a head injury? Does the child have early trauma? Do they have a member of their family who is institutionalized or an inmate or has been a member of the gang? So they really delve into a lot of the things that might affect children's behavior and for which they might need extra supports, but that the parents might not ever know to contact the school about. And of course, this is all purely based on parental reports. So no one has to give out this information. And then there are other counties that have like one line that says, anything you want us to know about your child? And they probably are not getting as great information. But more importantly, those kids are not going to have access to the same sorts of resources as the children that are in the other districts that are asking better questions, right? So this bill is really just designed to make sure that there's equitable access to resources across all 24 of our counties, and it's pretty simple that way. The counties can still come up with their own questionnaires. These are just the things that are guidelines that should be included in them. So they will have some guidance on that. I think that's, I'm trying to make this short for y'all since we're going so long. There's one technical amendment which makes changes to the advisory group membership and one amendment to clarify that the screening we're talking about is a parent questionnaire. So thank you for your consideration of House Bill 657. The bill will help all children in Maryland access equivalent resources for behavioral health support. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Delegate Guyton. We'll call the first witness, which is Catherine Carter. You have 2 minutes, Ms. Carter.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I am so happy to be here back at Ways and Means. I'm Catherine Carter, Vision and Behavior Health Advocate who worked on the Atticus Act. I am asking for a favorable report for this bill. It creates guidelines for current student health questionnaires that parents are already answering when they register their students, and allows parents to update their students' health and information annually. Several school districts are using these questionnaires to connect parents and students to local community resources, programs, and partnerships that they have developed. And I really ask that the members look at the end of my testimony where I really created a visual guideline of what's currently happening at the questionnaires. So please, please look at that. As you will see in these questionnaires that I put at the end of my testimony, they vary greatly among school districts, which can result in significant inequality. This bill allows parents to ask for help to support their struggling students and keep their students' health information that can impact their academics up to date. And once again, it's parent choice. It's parent voice. This bill was inspired by the collaborative work with Broward County and can help kids like Atticus who could go misdiagnosed or lack the right vision accommodations. It can also help my daughter after struggling for a really long time to find a local health provider. I actually reached out directly to the school in desperation. I said, I can't find anybody. The pediatrician's list is outdated. And they gave me a list. And from there, I was able to find a psychiatrist and a therapist that actually worked in conjunction with the IEP team. And my daughter made great strides in her IEP goals. In addition, when I registered my 5 kids this year, I was so thrilled to see the questionnaires that Howard County had added to their registration. I mean, questions like physical and dental health exam when the last one was. If a child has a vision problem, such as if they wear glasses or contacts or cross eyes, it just brought a smile to my face, to be honest. And this would have been such a valuable tool for kids like Atticus, my daughter with her mental health struggles, and the parents of the 168 students we saw in 2020 with our eye exam clinic. The parents actually said the list of local providers was the second best thing they got that day because they did struggle to find local providers. In addition, I want to say that parent engagement is the highest when they update their registration.
And Ms. Carter, can you give us your closing remark, please?
Absolutely. I want you guys to realize that my 7th grader who handed out the forms that on Tuesday said it's unfair that some kids get supports and others are not just because of where they live. I couldn't agree more, and I hope you see this bill not only gives parents with struggling students access to community resources they need, but help correct this inequality in our school system.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Appreciate it. We'll go next to Martin Kerrigan.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Martin Kerrigan. I'm a special educator working in Maryland Public Schools. I'm also the chairperson of the Maryland Traumatic Brain Injury, or TBI, Advisory Board. I'm here to offer favorable testimony to House Bill 657. According to the 2021 Special Education Census published by the Maryland State Department of Education, of the 111,315 students currently receiving special education services in Maryland, only 211 are identified as having traumatic brain injury, or TBI. At the same time, the Maryland Department of Health reported in 2017 alone, there were 4,794 emergency department visits and 210 hospitalizations for Marylanders aged birth through 18 with a diagnosis of TBI. This data has been consistent over the past 20 years. In 2018, the CDC published a report to Congress, The Management of Traumatic Brain Injury in Children, Opportunities for Action. According to the report, it is widely recognized that children with brain injury are underidentified for health and educational services and underserved by existing supports, placing them at risk for poor health and educational outcomes. The report states that a cause of the inability to access available educational services includes the potential underidentification of students with traumatic brain injury for special ed services. The report also found significant discrepancy between the incidence of TBI and the identification of children with TBI. One study suggests that fewer than 20% of students with a brain injury who likely need services are actually receiving them. In a recent survey, a majority of state special education directors reported that students with a TBI are not appropriately identified. They reported only 40% of students with TBI were actually classified under the TBI category. Students with a TBI were more often misidentified under other behavioral health categories or not identified at all. The nature of brain development can often mask problems from a brain injury for months or even years. Many times families do not make the connection between difficulties in school and a prior brain injury. Untreated traumatic brain injury can result in cognitive, social, emotional, and behavioral health problems, such as substance abuse, violent behavior, and an increase in criminal behavior. If we want to end the school to prison pipeline, this is one step that can be taken to help individuals who are at an increased risk of becoming involved in the correctional system. We are truly following the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and it is our duty and our legal obligation to make sure that we are properly identifying and serving students with disabilities. This is one more step that Maryland can take to continue being a national leader in public education. Please support all of our students and vote in favor of House Bill 657. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next we'll have, excuse me, Frank Patnella.
That's Patnella. Thank you. Thank you. Vice Chair,
Frank, good to
members
see
of,
you, man.
Great to see you too. Members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity. I'm Frank Patnella, Senior Education Advocate for the ACLU of Maryland, and we strongly support House Bill 657. I want to highlight a call that I got from a parent who was desperately trying to find mental health counselor for her daughter. Her daughter was usually very engaged in school and never exhibited any behavioral problems in class. But something happened. She suspects that the pandemic and being cut off from her friends had a significant impact on her well-being. And upon enrolling her daughter at a new public school in the city, she asked about counseling services for her daughter, but didn't hear anything back from the school. I called the district headquarters, and they told me that this particular school had a community-based mental health provider. I gave the parent the provider's number, and they were able to schedule an appointment with her and her daughter the very next day. Soon after, her daughter was receiving the help she needed. I just checked in with the parent, and she was happy to report that her daughter is back to normal and doing well in school, and that she checks in with this counselor occasionally. This was a huge barrier to learning, and it was quickly remedied. I've received a number of calls from other parents about the same issue early on during the fall when school reopened, as children began their readjustment to in-person school. We have to be concerned about the number of parents throughout the state that don't have access to an advocate that can reach the right person to get these services. With the Blueprint plan phasing in, it is important to maximize access to services that are already there. The Blueprint Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports is already pulling together a network of community providers, and they will be expanding their work over the next years as more funding phases in under the Blueprint. House Bill 657 is one important way we can take a step forward to achieve this goal. Under this bill, parents will have the option to identify the behavioral health needs of their children during the enrollment process. And the more we can standardize and operationalize how data is collected from parents, the more coordinated and effective our schools will be for those that they serve. This is a common sense bill, and the best part about it is that there's no cost to the state.
Mr. Patnella, can you wrap, please?
Yep. Everything needed to make this happen is already funded. For these reasons, please give this bill a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Tien.
Thank you so much. My name is Tien. I'm the President and Chief Science Officer at MD Logics. I'm a psychiatrist and brain development scientist and public mental health scientist. I developed and taught a course at Hopkins for about a decade on the multi-level etiology of mental disorders, thinking about risk factors and so forth. So this bill to me is incredibly important. It's actually very short, but to bring to bear the maximum knowledge that is available to guide development of standardized student screening is so important. I fully support it. I'm offering an amendment. I was told that what I wrote was a little bit technical and too scientific, but it's really important in written testimony that I believe this consortium should have strong representation of various aspects of science on the as members to guide this standardized, to create the guidelines for development of standardized screening, which is also not a static one-time endeavor. It should continue to evolve and make use of data that's collected by the measure to then guide further refinement and extension and adaptation and improvement of the measurement, which has so many ramifications in terms of the data collected, how it can do many things to strengthen the overall behavioral health ecosystem, for our children and youth. So I fully support the bill and thank you for your time.
Muted, Mr. Chair. You're muted.
Thanks. Next, we'll have Samir Ahiato.
He's not here.
It's not here, okay. Okay, we have questions. Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So this is great because one of the things that we really need very seriously is children to be available to learn when they come. And as Delegate Guyton has pointed out, and so has my good friend Kat Carter, kids who can't see and various other things, we need to help them before we can expect them to begin learning. So it sounds like every county has something like this to do, and you talked about different levels of it. When we gather this information, what's the first step? Who looks at it? Who actually kind of files through it to see if there are things there? who's a responsible individual, or what's sort of the procedure? And then I really don't want to know the whole thing, just who vets it at the start.
Yeah, thank you very much, Delegate Ebersol. I think that's a great question. I'll start, and I think actually Kat put her hand up to answer that as well. But I think right now what's happening is different than what will happen in the future, because what we're trying to do here is get ready for the implementation of the blueprint. This great idea was already put into that bill, right? It just has not actually come to fruition there. So this advisory group is really adding extra members just to work as an advisory to that consortium that we've already put together. At that point, it is that consortium's job to try to allocate those resources. But to answer your question for right now, what's happening, there are two answers. To answer your question for right now, what's happening is we've actually reached out to some of those school systems. And for instance, Howard County, which has this amazing questionnaire that has everything you could imagine under the sun on it, they actually spend the time going through in the nurses and counselors office to try to hook parents up with the resources that they know about now. So they're actually spending that time now in anticipation of what, hopefully will evolve through the blueprint. So it is being utilized. And then, if you're not collecting the information, in some of the other counties, of course, families aren't getting that resource. So
I agree.
I hope that answers it.
Well, the shorter answer would be the school nurse or the school health professional. That's the person who would first lay eyes on these and kind of vet them for potential problems.
Yep. Do you want?
I believe that's true. Kat also has talked to her school system. I think it may depend on school systems at the moment. But
I worry that it's, you gather data, but then we have to make sure somebody actually uses it to do the very important things that you're talking about here. So I'm just curious if maybe we should lay that out in this bill and say, who should be responsible for, actually combing through it. It's a lot of work, but it's important work.
Right. Thank you.
Details.
If you would like me to answer that, I can.
Yes, Miss. Yes, Miss Carter. Go ahead.
I contacted my school nurse and she says that they actually are, because it populates the student data file, they actually have been contacting parents who indicated need. And then I actually had an IEP meeting this morning for one of my kids, and the staff says that the school nurse is actually, letting them know if a health issue arises for the special ed kid. And it's been very helpful for the special ed team. So because it's populating the data file, I think I do think process is important.
Somebody's still got to look at it. And, with IEPs, we pay a little more attention to those things with them. We have to make sure that we're catching all the good ones. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. That's commentary and not question.
Thank you for that question, Delegate Ebersol. If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, if I point out that in the blueprint, it's actually the behavioral health coordinators that are in charge of doing that in the future. So I think that's laid out a little bit better in the future than it is now, but we can certainly tie it down for right now. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Tien, I think we got the answers to it already, but if you want to add one more comment or response.
Yeah, I just want to point out that's a great question. It's very important. There are good examples of how these issues are being addressed across Pennsylvania and Michigan, and they're working really well. So,
I do got just one quick question about. I think it's a great concept and great bill. I wonder if we are doing any physical assessments of students when they enter into the school system as well. Do we do any are those screenings happening or at all?
Not to my knowledge, sir. No, I think that's they are required to have a pediatrician's note, saying that they have seen a doctor and have immunizations, but otherwise I'm not aware of it.
Got it. Fair enough. Okay. Any other questions for Delegate Guyton and her panel? Seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the public hearing for House Bill 657. Members of the committee, we're going to move on to another Delegate Guyton bill, which I'm sure is really great bill. HB 660, commission to study the division of rehabilitative services. Delegate Guyton.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Do we need to get up and stretch, everybody, or are we okay? I might, if that's okay. So I am here again, Delegate Michelle Guyton, District 42B, Baltimore County. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for your patience today. This bill is something you may not have heard before. You may not have even heard of the department before, which is why I bring it before you. So I'm asking for a favorable report for House Bill 660, which is the Student Job Training Reformation Act. There is an organization, a division of the Maryland State Department of Education that most of us refer to as DOORS, Division of Rehabilitative Services. If you have never heard of that and you don't know what it is, you are in great company because most people have never heard of it. It was established in its current form in 1992. And it's actually been around, though, since 1929 as a division of vocational rehabilitation. Now, this is one of the longest lasting initiatives in state government, almost 100 years. I can't do math well. And it also, and this is really important, has one of the most significant budgets. So DOORS has 42% allocation of the Maryland State Department of Education budget, and yet hardly anyone is aware of its existence. Very few are aware of its mission, and anyone who's dealt with it, however, is often aware of its struggles. Right? So DOORS has been flying under the radar for a very, very long time. And while I respect our colleagues at the Maryland State Department of Education and the work that the superintendent for DOORS has attempted to do over the years, I'm also very concerned, as I hope you should be and will be, about the efficiency of that department and whether they're actually achieving their goals. So the mission of DOORS is to actually assist individuals with disabilities in pre-employment transition services coming out of school and finding long-term employment. They also help rehabilitate adults who have had accidents or become blind later in life. We have an example right now that I've been contacted by someone who was in prison for 20 years. During that time in prison, he went blind, right? So imagine what life was like 20 years ago. And now he's getting out of prison. He's been actually out of prison for a few months, and he has been unable to get any training through DOORS. And he's on a waiting list now. And he may get some help in 2 years or so, but he's coming from a situation where he's absolutely unable to negotiate things for himself. Their job is to work with him as well. So one of the main problems with DOORS, I think I just illustrated it, is the inefficiency of the system and the extreme waits for services. He would be considered an emergency case, and he may be waiting for years. The DOORS 2020 annual report states that for that year, 2020, 6,124 people were on the wait list. 318 of them, 5% of them, moved from the wait list that year. So it would take 20 years for them to get to the bottom of that wait list. The fact is they won't, because the level of disability categorizes you for priority. So like the gentleman I just mentioned who really needs immediate services to get a job and to be in society and move around his world would be at the top level. So in a couple of years, he may get service. There is a middle level for people who have less severe disabilities, and the wait list there is about 8 years. However, there's a third category for people who have less severe disabilities. And the important thing to recognize here is these people may actually require fewer services, less training to be independently employed. They are never going to receive those services. They don't even attempt to put them on the wait list anymore. So this means that so many individuals who should legally be eligible for this program are honestly left without any resources. But for the fiscal watchdogs on this committee, and hopefully we all are to some extent, another very, very serious concern is that during the last yearly report, DOORS graduated only 925 individuals to full-time employment. However, this is the big number, they're being funded in that year at a whopping $352,966.80. That adds up to $380,588 for each client who is successfully achieving employment. I don't believe that anyone on this committee would consider that an acceptable return on our investment. So what are we going to do about it? As you know, I got a plan. The solution that I bring with House Bill 660 is that I don't have all the answers. I worked at the board at MSDE. I was one of the few who was aware of this program. It was never discussed in board meetings. And I've been talking to people about ideas of improvement for so many years. The one thing that people do agree on, and you'll see that in the testimony and in the written testimonies of support, is that we really need to do something. My idea, all I have right now is to bring a commission of stakeholders, and these are very, very terrific stakeholders, to the table to study and make recommendations on many of the primary concerns that we've discussed over the past few years. And some of those include things like, does DOORS need to be out from under the Maryland State Department of Education where it would get more attention? Does it need its own board? How do we get rid of that waitlist problem? And are we prioritizing people in the correct ways? But mostly, how can we I don't want to pull any money from this program, it's very important, but how can we make that money actually work efficiently for us so that the people who need help from DOORS are actually going to receive it in a timely fashion? So I'm going to let it go there. You can tell I care about this a lot. I thank you for your support of House Bill 660. I'm aware of a couple of amendments being suggested today by advocacy groups, and I think I've told them all that I would accept them as friendly amendments. Happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Delegate Guyton. First witness, we'll have Stacy Herman.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, Vice Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Stacy Herman, and I am the Assistant Vice President of Neurodiversity and Community Workforce Development at Kennedy Krieger Institute. I'm here today in support of House Bill 660. You have my written testimony, but I will briefly highlight a few points. At Kennedy Krieger, we have a Neurodiversity at Work program. Core Foundations at Kennedy Krieger Institute is a community rehabilitation partner through the Division of Rehabilitation Services, providing short-term employment services to individuals with disabilities. DOORS has crucial services for individuals with disabilities. These programs are the building blocks for a successful transition from school to meaningful employment and increasing independence. Accessing services through DOORS has proven to be challenging for many individuals with disabilities and has become significantly more challenging due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Establishing the commission to study DOORS is a formal way to review and analyze the current policies, processes, and efficiencies of DOORS, with the goal of making systematic change to broaden DOORS services and to make those services available to more Marylanders with disabilities. There are over 1 million Marylanders who identify as having a disability, and only about 23,000 who access DOORS services each year. With access to the right support services, individuals with disabilities contribute significantly to the economic growth of Maryland communities. Partners like Kennedy Krieger have readily available recommendations to enhance the programming of DOORS. Having a formalized commission will accelerate these efforts and have the potential to bring more individuals into the program and support their meaningful employment. On behalf of Kennedy Krieger, we ask for your favorable report on House Bill 660, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Lisa Widerlight. And I am messing up everybody's name today.
It's okay. It's Wiederlight. You were close.
Thanks.
But good afternoon. My name is Lisa Wiederlight. I'm the parent of a 21-year-old son with autism and other disabilities who graduated from high school last year in Maryland. I'm respectfully asking for your favorable consideration of HBC 660, which would create a commission to study DOORS. I'm fairly active in the autism community in Maryland, and with the exception of one parent I know, none of us have had positive experiences with DOORS. Among the issues with which I'm aware that DOORS seems unable to serve those with the highest level of needs relating to independence and communication, that the employment sites with which it has agreements are limited so they can be far away, and transportation for people with disabilities itself can be limiting, and that DOORS staff have been non-responsive, so just participating or attempting to participate requires so much follow-up that it behooves caregivers to seek other options. This is not a great service for our community. According to research from Drexel University, up to 80% of people with autism are under or unemployed. We need a streamlined and effective system that is responsive to the needs of the whole disability community. This, unfortunately, right now does not seem to be DOORS. I will leave you with an example of my own. When my son was in high school, we attempted to participate in a DOORS program called Pre-Employment Transitioning Services, or pre-ETS. This program focuses only on students who are in transition in the ages of 14 to 21. I was told they would provide job training through internships in the community. After completing a mound of paperwork and sending it to DOORS for my son, I received a call from a DOORS staff member. She told me there was an opportunity for him to work at Sinai Hospital doing office work. I accepted gleefully, but asked if there would be a one-on-one aide for him, as he has a one-on-one aide in school. Also, I told her that he has epilepsy and really can't be left alone right now, as well as having some, at the time, communication issues. The DOORS staff member told me she'd check and get back to me, but she never did. I was shocked and dismayed a few weeks later to receive a letter that said that my son was being disenrolled in the program. I then called a DOORS supervisor, and that DOORS staff person said he would be re-enrolled. However, we never received any further calls or communication about my son participating in the program. DOORS website clearly states DOORS helps people with disabilities who want to work. I can only tell you that is not what happened in my son's case, and not in the cases of my autism parent friends. I hope the commission's work that will result in a positive and effective change for the disability community at DOORS. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. Megan Collins.
Good afternoon again. My name is Megan Jones now, and I am a staff attorney with Disability Rights.
I'm just messing up everybody's name again.
Oh, no, it's me. I messed up. My
No, I'm
my
joking. Go
account
ahead.
is old on my MGA. I'm a staff attorney with Disability Rights Maryland, the state's protection and advocacy organization, tasked with advocating for the legal rights of people with disabilities throughout the state. We support House Bill 660, and we've proposed a few amendments. We appreciate the purpose of the bill to create a commission to study and evaluate the operation of DOORS. This effort is much needed, as many students with disabilities are not able to access or are not able to easily access services from DOORS. Currently, DOORS serves individuals with disabilities through the process Delegate Guyton described, known as order of selection, and only individuals with the most significant disabilities are able to get services promptly. Though, as she noted, there is a large waiting list even for that. Because full DOORS services are not available to most students following graduation, and because the quality of transition services is so variable across the state, many students with disabilities throughout the state who don't have the most significant disabilities are left in a void when they leave high school, prepared neither for employment nor for post-secondary options, and without supports they need to be able to access any opportunities. Additionally, graduates with disabilities in more rural and remote areas of the state have even fewer opportunities available to them. With regard to the amendments we support, DRM appreciates being included as a member of the commission this bill would create. However, the protection and advocacy system actually includes a number of federally created programs. We host all of those programs except one, called the Client Assistance Program, which is actually a protection and advocacy program specifically for individuals dissatisfied with vocational rehabilitation services. We used to house this Client Assistance Program. However, it is now housed within DOORS. DRM appreciates being a member of the commission and would suggest that House Bill 660 be amended to include the Sister Protection and Advocacy Agency, CAP, as a representative of DOORS consumers as a member of the commission. We also support amendments brought forward by the education.
Ms. Jones, can you have your last line, please, for us?
We also support the amendments brought forward by the Education Advocacy Coalition, but overall support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Rachel London.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Rachel London. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council. We are a statewide policy organization that creates change to make it possible for people with developmental disabilities to live the lives they want with the support they need. As you've heard, DOORS provides critical services, or should be providing critical services. And you have my written testimony. I'm not going to repeat everything. But the commission this bill creates would take really important steps to make sure more people with disabilities get the services and supports they need through a more efficient and effective system. So we absolutely support the bill, and we appreciate the sponsor's willingness to work with us with two amendments that I do want to talk about. We believe both of them would strengthen the commission's purview. The first is to add the Department of Disabilities as a required member of the commission. And the second is to add some language around that the commission shall evaluate and make recommendations on ways to enhance the capacity of DOORS to serve more people through a thorough review of the Workforce Technology Center and ways to provide more inclusive work-based experiences. This is really important because for those of you that don't know, the Workforce Technology Center is a segregated center in Baltimore. Makes it not accessible to everyone. And for those that it is accessible to, we already know there's more inclusive ways to provide similar services and supports. So exploring ways to reimagine the services that the Workforce Technology Center does provide, they could prove to be more cost effective. So we do think an evaluation of that specifically should be included. But for all of those reasons, we absolutely support this bill. Again, thank the sponsor and happy to answer any questions and look forward to the work of the commission.
Thank you. Our last speaker will be Ellen Caligari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. And I want to say I'm so grateful to Delegate Guyton for bringing this important legislation forward. I've been working on behalf of individuals with disabilities for over 4 decades, which tells you a little bit about how old I am. Back the beginning when I was an assistant attorney general, I dealt with doors. And now as a private attorney, I represent individuals with disabilities throughout. I'm here today to testify on behalf of the Education Advocacy Coalition, which is a coalition of approximately 40 organizations and individuals concerned with education for individuals with disabilities. The EAC supports strongly taking a fresh look, as Delegate Guyton said, at doors and how it's spending its money and how it might be better reimagined. Currently, as Delegate Guyton explained, doors serve students through this process known as order of selection, which means that only students with the most significant disabilities get services. And as Delegate Guyton said, you might wait a long time, even if you're a student with very significant disabilities. DOORS has this pre-employment transition services that are supposed to better help students who are in high school to prepare for work and post-secondary education. I have represented students who've gone through that process. As was testified earlier, DOORS is saying that they no longer have the human resources available to manage both the pre-ETS program and their vocational rehabilitation program, which means the quality of services throughout Maryland is spotty, and you can't rely on it in necessarily one jurisdiction being as it is in another jurisdiction.
Ms. Caligari, thank you for your testimony. Can you give us your final thoughts?
Sure. So the Education Advocacy Coalition strongly supports this legislation and urges favorable with the amendments that we have in our written testimony that Rachel just testified to a few moments ago. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions? Delegate Guyton, I do have a question for you about DOORS. Within a commission that you want to create, I was reading through it. Does it include, can you make clear whether or not this will look at the capacity of DOORS to be able to improve their capacity, improve how many staff members they have? Can you just speak to that? Like, it talks about budgeting and how much budget it can increase, but doesn't speak directly to like staffing for the agency.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think that's a really important thing for this commission to look at, among other things. And I'll ask you to be patient with me for a second. This is number 4 bill, and I haven't gotten them all pulled out in order yet. So I'm looking for the actual legislation. I'm still remembering which one we're talking about.
It does have a great list of things that they're looking at.
Sure.
I think we should be very clear about staffing.
No, absolutely. And that, I think, is certainly within the intent and the mission of this. I mean, there's so, and I feel like I'm just knocking doors. I know they do some good work, but there's so much that's not working that I wouldn't want to limit this to, I wouldn't want to limit this at all, honestly. So I tried not to be incredibly prescriptive. We said they could add extra members if they wanted. They could look at other issues if they wanted. because I don't know everything about the program. I just know I hear a lot of things. So, and I work with all these people. So, and then just to mention a lot of the amendments that you've heard, well, they're pretty much the same. And we've already spoken on those and they're very simple to add. And certainly they would be friendly amendments. So no problem with that at all.
Well, if this bill moves, there'll be amendment for me to add me to the bill.
I'd be happy to have it.
Thank you, Delegate Guy. Any other questions for the delegate and her panel? Seeing none, that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 660. Members of the committee, we're going to switch to House Bill 678. Delegate Guyton, Arts, Equity, and Education Act. You're muted, Delegate. Hey, Haley, Sarah, can we unmute Delegate Guyton? Oh, there you go.
Does that work? Okay,
Yep.
I, again, have no idea how that keeps happening to people. Thank you so much. I'm here now, Delegate Guyton, District 42B, Baltimore County, to request your consideration of House Bill 678, Arts, Equity, and Education Act. This is my last one for today. Thank you for your patience and your consideration. This bill aims to expand access to arts education by requiring the State Department of Education to strengthen accountability for compliance with COMAR, Code of Maryland regulations for the fine arts, and it also establishes a grant program to achieve these aims. The Arts, Equity, and Education Act dedicates funding to supplement school district efforts in meeting COMAR requirements and closing equity gaps in arts education. And equity is really what this bill is about. The funding may be used for resources, staffing, materials, equipment, professional development, and will be administered by MSDE through existing grant and reporting processes that are already required in COMAR. So we know arts education has been shown to promote academic achievement, have therapeutic behavioral benefits, and even improve the attendance of kids. Each and every student in Maryland deserves to have access to high quality arts education as part of their public school education, but they don't. Education and arts education is not equitable. For example, Anne Arundel County and Queens Anne County schools have an average of more than 4 arts teachers per school, which is great. Baltimore City schools average fewer than 2. Baltimore City also has the highest teacher workload in the arts compared to all of the other jurisdictions by far. So the Arts, Equity, and Education Act would work to close gaps like these. I urge a favorable report on House Bill 678 designed to increase equity in arts throughout Maryland. Thank you so much.
Thank you. First speaker we have is on your panel is Rick Tyler.
Thank you, Vice Chair Washington, members of the committee. My name is Rick Tyler of the Maryland Education Coalition. I also have 50 years experience as a music educator, performer, researcher, and advocate for the arts. And MET supports HB 678, Arts, Equity, and Education Act. The National Association for Music Education stated, it's imperative that all students have access to an equitable delivery of arts education that includes dance, media arts, music, theater, and visual arts that supports the education, social, and emotional well-being of all students. MEC agrees. This bill, when passed, will help ensure that all schools provide all students adequate, equitable access to all art forms using experienced instruction of quality as defined in COMAR and the blueprint. Denying Maryland students quality access to the full range of arts education is no different than denying them access to English, math, science, or social studies. Arts education is not just about who's the gifted. Also, it is a graduation requirement. The arts is also the only universal language and the only core subject area that has a direct correlation with all the other core subject areas. And research finds that structured art and music education programs taken over 2 years or more often results in higher SAT scores and more students attending and staying in college. Since learners are the future contributors and creative leaders of tomorrow's workforce, arts education is essential to every learner's educational foundation and training for future employment in an increasingly complex and interconnected world. Therefore, MEC urges the General Assembly and the committee to report favorably on HB 678, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tyler. We're next going to have Julia DeBusolo.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Delegate Guyton and members of the committee. My name is Julia DeBusolo, and I'm the Director of Arts Every Day, a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing equitable access to the arts in Baltimore City schools. The arts are required, and they are required core subject area under the state's education regulations in COMAR section 13A.4. This regulation is currently an unfunded mandate. Lack of dedicated funding contributes to inequitable access to the arts statewide, but especially in rural districts and districts with high concentrations of poverty. This bill takes the transformative step of allocating funds to ensure that schools can meet COMAR's requirements. And it is important to note that it would expand the existing line item of the fine arts grant within the state budget and be administered by MSDE through existing request and reporting procedures. Districts will be able to request funding to supplement their existing efforts to meet COMAR and use funds based on their unique needs. HB 678 will make a tremendous impact on a district like Baltimore City that has already been steadily increasing access to the arts through a community-supported strategic plan, but still has a long way to go towards equitable access. Since adoption of the Baltimore City Fine Arts Plan, the total number of fine arts teachers has increased by 40%. But as of school year 2021, there's still a lot of inequities that persist, with only a few schools offering dance, theater, and instrumental music. The Equity in Arts Education Act will enable city schools to make significant progress on the remaining equity gaps. I support HB 678 and ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
That was perfect. Thank you. Janaya Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janaya Harris, and I'm a senior at Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. I am here today to voice my support of HB 678, the Equity in Arts Education Act. Art is important to my peers and I because it gives us a voice, and art allows us as young people to let out those inner feelings and express ourselves fully. Without access to arts, many young people will be robbed from experiencing their full potential greatness. When I first started school, I attended a Baltimore County school, and I had the opportunity to explore my art interests with visual art, music, and more. When I attended a county school, I remember being able to paint as much as I wanted without even realizing that it was a privilege. In the second grade, I moved from the county to the city and had to attend a city school. My experience at a city school was totally different from a county school. From the supplies to the environment and the programs, there was an extremely noticeable difference in the county and the city school as a whole. To think that I would not even know what that experience was like had I not moved amazes me till this day. I am happy to have had that experience with both schools because now I understand the importance of using my voice when it comes to equity and art. HB 678 will take a big step towards making sure all students have access to art, music, theater, dance, and media arts, no matter where they live in Maryland. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Next, we'll have Nkena Wosu. Nkena Wosu.
Right here. I'm right here.
There you go, my man. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for your consideration on this important bill. My name is Ikena Wosu, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Maryland, and I'm here to voice my support for House Bill 678. For a long time, the value of art education has been extremely underappreciated. Fine arts has been proven to provide benefits that ties into both mental and physical well-being, no, mental and emotional well-being of students. It is important that we promote fine arts in our schools because it stimulates our students' creativity, confidence, and perseverance, which is all important for their development. Students who participate in a variety of art activities increase their verbal, reading, and math skills, as well as their critical thinking skills, such as analyzing and problem solving. Many students in this state do not have access to adequate fine arts program in their schools, especially those who come from low-income community. For this reason, funding for more adequate fine arts programs in our schools would be transformative for our students who do not have access to these types of programs. So I urge the committee to vote favorable on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Michael Bell.
Vice Chair, he's not here.
Michael Bell is not here. So we'll go to Crystal Williams.
Hello, my name is Crystal Williams, and I am a 15-year educator from Maryland Public Schools, spending the first 14 years in Baltimore City Public Schools. My story is that I am a product of Maryland Public Education. I'm a student, and I am currently a teacher in Prince George's County, but my first years was spent in Baltimore City Public Schools. After spending a great amount of time in Prince George's County, I'm from Aclu, Maryland, which is a very rural area. I attended school in Aclu, and from Aclu to being in Oxon Hill, Maryland, my experience was relatively the same with the arts. I was able to start band in the 6th grade and ultimately able to continue to and through high school all the way to college, and thus become a successful music major and first-generation college student. It has been over 30 years since I've been in a public school, and the problem with equity has changed immensely in a new district, Baltimore City, which I would find upon graduating from Morgan State. My first position, I spent the first week trying to locate instruments for a program in middle school in which I was the very first music teacher ever hired. I spent hours of locating instruments in pawn shops and having instruments donated because there was simply not enough money to provide me the inventory to be the best that I could be for my students, starting with their most basic needs. For many of my students, purchasing instruments on their own is not a feasible option, so their materials and requests for supplies lie solely on the school. This is a problem that occurs in many of our lower economic areas and districts in Maryland, specifically Baltimore City Public Schools. As the music technology chair for MMEA, I've gathered data on regional representation for all state level ensembles, and the dynamics are different. One, only 75%.
Ms. Williams, Williams, thank you very much. Can you wrap your last comments for us, please?
Yes, I stand here today to say that this bill 6778 will greatly increase staffing and resources for some of our most low economic areas and districts in rural areas. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Last speaker will be Frank Patnella. Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. I'm Frank Patnella, a senior education advocate for the ACLU of Maryland, and we strongly support House Bill 678 to bolster arts education throughout our state. You have my testimony, so I'll use my time to talk about how the arts has been life-changing for me. Growing up as a brown kid with parents from other countries was difficult. On top of that, I had significant learning disabilities and bouts of depression. I had a hard time fitting into the structure of school, and I was always behind my peers academically. But then it happened. By chance, my mother found me playing the piano by ear at a friend's house in 4th grade. And that's where my musical journey began.
Staffing and resources for some of our
and lessons. Sorry, I need to pause.
Yeah, Miss.
Okay. My parents got me a piano and lessons, and I loved it. It helped me socially, making friends as I played in bands and for my church. It helped me learn how to concentrate and focus. I started doing better in other classes. And as an introvert, music was always there when I was feeling depressed. Honestly, I'm pretty certain I wouldn't be here if I didn't have it. I went on to study music theory and composition as one of my majors and also picked up a minor in jazz piano in college. I went on to graduate school and became a social worker in Baltimore City schools. I remember one boy who wouldn't open up, so I tried something new. I sat him down at a piano, laid down some simple jazzy groove, and gave him just one note to improvise, like da, 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 right? Then I gave him another note, da, 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 and so on, right? And he began opening up, and pretty soon he was jamming, and more importantly, he was smiling. And he improved to the point where he didn't need weekly counseling. And this also brings up the issue of how we approach mental health. It's not always about deficits, but that's for another day. He kept coming back, and other kids started coming, wanting to learn music. So I took it on, became an organized after-school program with around 25 students. And at the end of the year, I helped them organize an event that featured their own work: poetry, spoken word, set to music, dance, comedy routines, and other theatrical sketches. For me, this reinforced the belief that arts education is so universal.
Mr. Patnella, can you give us your last comment, please?
Sure. So I just want to say, let's change a lot of lives with the arts and fill our schools with music and creativity via a favorable vote on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Delegate Guyton and her panel? Seeing none, that concludes the public hearing for House Bill 678. Members of the committee, we're going to turn to House Bill 618, and we are welcomed by the members of the Judiciary Committee. We have Delegates Crutchfield, Davis, and Prince George's own Delegate Juanita Fisher here with us too. So Delegate Cox, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, let's start. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It's an honor to be here today to represent all of Maryland, minorities, and everyone in Maryland regarding parental rights. It's an important issue in our state, and the Maryland Parental Rights Act reserves and outlines the rights of parents in regard to the upbringing of their minor children, providing clarity for government agents and parents alike. As parents, we have many legal responsibilities concerning our children, and legally we must feed, clothe, and house our children, make sure they receive an education, and make sure they have adequate health care, and of course, love and spiritually provide nourishment that each child needs. As good parents, we willingly take on these responsibilities, and we take seriously the rights that we have to determine how our children are raised. But over the last 2 years, parents across America have come to realize that some public institutions do not adequately recognize the rights of parents over the upbringing of their children. And in particular, education systems and state leaders have claimed that we as parents do not have the right to determine the best education for our children. Schools have shown an alarming tendency to make determinations on how children are raised and the health care they receive when they're within the walls of a school, often without the knowledge of parents and often against the consent of the parents. This bill sets the relationship straight. Parents hold not only the primary role of responsibility for their children, they hold all the rights regarding their children. The parent-school relationship necessarily has the parent on top of the hierarchy over the child's upbringing. The school is a temporary educator, but the parent holds the responsibility of the care, custody, control, education, and influence of their children. The Supreme Court long ago settled the law in America regarding the parental liberty interest over the care, custody, and control of their children. And the court held in Meyer v. Nebraska that, quote, to marry, establish a home, and bring up children, and to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience, and to generally enjoy those privileges long recognized at common law, is essential to the orderly pursuit of the happiness of free men and women. And in Pierce v. Society of Sisters, the court said, the fundamental theory of liberty upon which all governments in this union repose excludes any general power of the state to standardize its children by forcing them to accept instruction from public teachers only. The child is not the mere creature of the state. Those who nurture him and direct his destiny have the right, coupled with the high duty, to recognize and prepare him for additional obligations. Parents and their children are simply customers of the education system. The child is the primary consumer of a service provided by the school, and this business relationship confers no rights on the school system of the state. The parents' patriae doctrine is a temporary custody limited by the permission of the parents. In this unique situation where the customer is also literally the boss, we elect the boards of education. Where there are appointed, we elect those who appoint the boards of education. And let us not forget, it is our tax dollars that pays every cent of the funding for every person hired in the system. Marylanders have a right to know what's going on in their schools, where they send their children, and of course, where they foot 100% of the bill. They have a right to know what their children are learning and to object to it if they find that necessary. They have a right to know if their children are getting health care, but to be asked their permission first. And they have a right to know what information the state is collecting on their children and to opt out of it before that information is collected. They have a right to know everything that their taxpayer dollar is funding and to object to what they don't like and what they see. The school system has a responsibility to the parents to make sure that their parental rights are protected. So therefore, I respectfully ask that this committee favorably report House Bill 618, the Maryland Parental Rights Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Amy Adams speak in support of the bill.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon to all the committee members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Amy Adams, and I am the president of the Baltimore County Parent and Student Coalition. I'm speaking to you as a representative of this nonpartisan group of parents in support of HB 618, the Parent Bill of Rights. We are a grassroots group that formed in 2020, advocating for parents' choice to send our children safely back to in-person school. We have matured over time, but continue to advocate for parental choice and rights within the education system. We think this bill is very important, and it would align us with 11 other United States, including Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Kansas, Michigan, Nevada, Oklahoma, Utah, Virginia, and Wyoming, who have similar bills already in place. Over the last 2 years, Maryland has not been a leader when it comes to advocating for children. We were one of the last 3 states to open our public schools and welcome children back in the spring of 2021, and our children paid the price with severe social, emotional, and academic impacts. We are currently one of the last of 4 states to remove the statewide mask mandate for public school students. Passing this bill would allow Maryland to be at the forefront of the movement to protect family rights. We agree that no information related to health and well-being of a minor child documented by an employee of the school district shall be withheld from a child's parent or guardian. We agree that each county board, in consultation with parents, teachers, and administrators, should adopt a policy to promote parent involvement. BCPS does have a policy in place, but it is not fully executed in practice. We agree that a plan for parental participation in schools to improve parent-teacher cooperation in homework, school attendance, and discipline is important. We ask for a procedure for parents to object to instructional materials that might be in conflict with their fundamental value system. And we hope that at least 14 days before the first day of the school year, each county board would provide the parent or guardians of each enrolled student with written summary or online summary of the curriculum for that student's grade, written in plain language, and explain any changes from the immediate preceding year. So we find a lot of value in this bill, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of it. I hope that you all vote in favor of HB 618. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Mary Taylor.
Thank you. I apologize. I had to unmute myself. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Mary Taylor, and I'm the vice president of the Baltimore County Parent and Student Coalition. Amy did the introduction of our group, but we are a nonpartisan group of 4,700 parents, students, and taxpayers in Baltimore County. I'm testifying today in favor of HB 618, the Maryland Parental Rights Act. This bill isn't simply about identifying and establishing parental rights over their children, but it is about building and reestablishing trust of parents in the public education system. HB 618 enshrines public education transparency in law and will result in increased parental involvement in their children's education. Thank you, Delegate Cox. This bill is long overdue. This legislation gives back to parents by requiring accountability and transparency on the part of school districts, allowing parents to know what's being taught and push back on curriculum they believe is inappropriate or harmful to their children's education. Personal politics have no place in the classroom, and this legislation seeks to prevent that. Additionally, the Maryland Parental Rights Act will solidify the fact that parents have a fundamental right to direct the upbringing, education, and care for their minor children. This is an extremely important part of this bill because, quite honestly, I think segments of our society have forgotten this fact. There's many things in this bill that I absolutely agree with, but the 5 fundamental things that come to my mind is parents have a right to know what's being taught in schools and be able to see reading material. We have a right to be heard. We have a right to see the budget and spending. We have a right to protect our child's privacy, stop dating mining our children, and we have a right to be updated on any violent activity at school, just to name a few. So in conclusion, transparency in government is a good thing that should be supported by all elected officials. HB 618, the Maryland Parental Rights Act, enables transparency in public education, which is funded by taxpayers and enables parental involvement in their child's education. So for those reasons I stated above, I implore you to vote in favor of HB 618, Maryland Parental Rights Act. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll have Shannon Ledbetter.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Today, I am testifying on behalf of myself as a mom of 2 and on behalf of the nonpartisan Coalition of Maryland Parents and Students. This is an association of over 50,000 parents and 250,000 students from all over the state of Maryland across all counties who have united to advocate for the rights of parents and students in our public schools. The past 2 years have witnessed a troubling trend in public education that has resulted in many parents around the state of Maryland feeling more and more marginalized in their child's education. The effects of COVID-19 shutdowns have strained the relationship and trust many parents and students have with their school systems. In many cases, parents' concerns have been disregarded, ignored, and dismissed. This bill will go a long way towards rebuilding the trust of parents in our public schools, trust that is needed for our children to thrive and succeed. It puts into law basic protections for the rights of parents to be involved with their child's education, protections to ensure parental consent before any medical exam takes place, notification of parents of violent activity occurring on school grounds or school-sponsored events in ways that protect the privacy of those involved, of course, opportunity for parental involvement in updating student privacy policies and protection from selling or sharing student data for commercial purposes. Recognition and protection of parents' rights to assemble and have a voice in their child's education, including protecting the right of parents to testify at Board of Education meetings. Disclosure of the curriculum being taught and any updates to the state's academic standards or benchmarks so that parents can be aware and an active participant in their child's education. And the opportunity for parents to meet in person with their child's teacher 2 times a year. These are not radical requests, and many of them are things that some of our local school districts already do, and many teachers and school leaders already support and agree with.
Ms. Ledbetter, can you give us your last comment, please?
All this bill does is it codifies these rights into law in the same way that our Bill of Rights codifies our basic human rights.
Thank you, Ms. Ledbetter. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, we'll have Belinda Lawson.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Belinda. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Belinda Lawson, and I'm a proud parent in Carroll County, Maryland. I currently have a 6th grader. She'll be entering 7th grade next year, and I strongly support the Parental Rights Act Bill 618. As a Surgeon General has reported this year, we are currently having a mental health crisis amongst our children. As the school system often promotes more family involvement, this will give parents an opportunity to not only help in making important decisions, but to also help, along with the school system, heal from this extremely divisive and disruptive school year. There's a few reasons why I want to talk today. The first one being the exposure to sensitive material at young ages. I realize the kids do, of course, need to learn about certain topics that are sensitive in nature. However, I do believe parents should have the right to know what these topics are and what will be discussed in an approved permission slip beforehand. There is something that happens right now. However, parents are often notified after the fact. Most of these topics are actually taught within our own homes. I appreciate the public education system for helping to introduce these topics. However, I think it's only fair for us as parents to have the right to be warned in advance so we can prepare for later discussions at home, since our children are growing at different ages. Just yesterday, the bill HB 194 was voted against, allowing parents to review family life curriculum on the school's website. Without the transparency from our schools, I'm afraid what our children's future may look like. Another great concern of mine is the issue of bullying within the school system, because schools are handling situations differently. This bill will give us an opportunity to be able to have information so parents can help protect our children. If there is something important I need to know that's happening with or to my child as a parent, I would like to know what that is so I can help protect.
And Ms. Lawson, thank you very much. Can you give us your last comment, please?
Thank you. I'm hoping you will pass the Maryland Parental Acts Bill 618 so we can work together with our school systems to help protect our kids.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Appreciate it. Katie Kimball.
Hi, how are you? I'm at the bus stop, so I brought my speech. Okay, so thank you for hearing me. I would like to speak in favor of House Bill 618. I'm a parent of 3 school-aged children and a member of the Baltimore County Parent and Student Coalition. I found that the most redeeming quality that came from the last 2 years of pandemic shutdowns was that parents were provided a window into schools, classrooms, and learning, and in a word, transparency. And that is what this bill means to me as a parent. Over the course of the pandemic, parents got a new visibility into what kids were learning and what teachers were teaching and how schools were using their time. Perhaps the thing heard most often from other parents during the past 2 years, including myself, is I had no idea. We had no idea this teacher was so organized, our child was so confused, or how much or how little learning actually occurs during their kids' school day. And occasionally complete shock with some of the content being discussed. Over time, school systems have evolved routines that have walled parents off from classrooms. In too many places, despite all the superficial attempts at improving stakeholders and community, I've seen schools treat parents as a nuisance. Too many school leaders find it convenient to give the gentle brush off to parents concerned about discipline, special education, or testing. And this pandemic brought transparency. This transparency had all kinds of ramifications, and there's great power in this kind of openness. It can strengthen school communities, allow parents to see what's happening in their children's school, and provide students more of the support they need. House Bill 618 is our way to keep this transparency and build on it long after the kids have returned to the classroom. Parents should be able to review what public schools are teaching, and parents should have a say in the matters related to the core principles introduced in this House Bill 618 that bring parent involvement and choice into the schoolhouse where their children are learning and growing. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Kimball. Next, we'll have Vince McAvoy.
Thank you so much, committee. Appreciate your time. Delegate Dan Cox, thank you for bringing this very, very important bill. We're living in a time when the federal government has declared a state of war against parents. That's why this type of thing is so timely and so needed. We parents, one, are the allies of raising children into a productive society. But secondly, we have rights that go extending far, far beyond what the government can do, and certainly far beyond what a school system can do. And what Delegate Dan Cox's bill does is he actually iterates these things for us. When he's quoting from 5-1502, 1503, 1504, these are all appellate cases. These are established rights. Parents aren't asking for anything. This is what it is. The benefit of this bill is to getting people back on track and also offering some accountability. And that's what this will happen. If you can imagine going into schools and seeing these parental bill of rights and saying, oh, by the way, let's step it up with the PTA meetings. Let's make sure you're there every week. Let's keep in touch with what's going on with your children. We already have parents, and we just heard great parents talk about this issue. But what this goes to right now is a complete overreach. I've seen things that I've never seen in my life where they're trying to bar parents from what's going on in schools. You would only do that if you're trying to hide something. I mean, the bill is talking about biometrics, data, imagery, and so forth. Several years back, I talked to the Assistant Attorney General at the MSBE meeting and basically was told, yeah, we're on it, we'll get something done. Nothing's changed. Things have only gotten worse. This bill is highly needed because we have people in authority who think that children are somehow their de facto, I don't know, slaves or adoptees or something like that. They're not. They're the children of their parents. This bill will help us get back
Mr.
on track
Mr. McAvoy.
and help us make it so that we're all on the same page. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we'll have Patricia Strubble.
Good afternoon. I am a Maryland mother speaking on behalf of all parents who believe when it comes to raising children, family is always, always better than the government. It's time, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, please, it's time we unite to protect children and families by preserving parental rights. The liberty of parents to direct the upbringing, education, and care of children is a fundamental right. Our concern should come as no surprise. Some Maryland what are the issues? We've got some Maryland public school curriculums include the discriminatory critical race theory, which pits children against one another based upon race. There's an extreme sex education curriculum, including pornography. There's a push for transgenderism on vulnerable and innocent prepubescent children and teens. There are so many families that believe the reality of human biology is a gift from God and that we should have no right to change that. And these children may be suffering from a treatable mental illness or birth defect and deserve our compassion, not a mutilation of their bodies. COVID-19 mask and vaccine mandates have hijacked the role of parents who should be the health, emotional, and moral guides of their children. For many parents, not only does covering any part of a child's face obstruct their breathing, but masking children is contrary to our prudential judgment. Do you realize more kids have committed suicide during COVID because of these policies than have died from COVID? But nobody, I mean nobody, wants to talk about that. Those kids are simply collateral damage in the eyes of the policymakers. Outside authorities have no right to control the rearing of children rather than flesh and blood mothers and fathers. House Bill 618, thank you, Delegate Cox. It says yes to parents having the right to act in conscience and in freedom so as to personally make moral decisions for their families. It says yes to family cohesion.
Ms.
Yes,
Strobel,
to well-adjusted
Ms.
children.
Strobel,
Yes,
Ms. Strobel,
to protecting children.
Ms. Strobel, thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much. Okay, thank you.
Please, let's come together. It's
Ms.
important. for children.
Strobel, thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, do we have any questions of the committee? Do we have any questions for the sponsor of the bill and the speakers? Thank you. We'll go on next to for the unfavorables. Actually, no, I think I'm missing a favorable. Actually, Mahan Kantami. Are you on? No? Okay. With that
She's
said-
there, she's there, Mr. Vice Chair. I see her. Dr. Katami, can you unmute? I see her on the screen. I don't know if she's here.
Sarah, you mind helping us out?
She is there. We need her to unmute herself though.
Got it. Okay, well, I'm gonna turn it over to the chair. Madam Chair, you ready? Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so while Dr. Katami attempts to unmute herself, we will move on to the unfavorables. Abby Wong for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair and committee members. My name is Abby Wong. I am speaking on behalf of Free State Justice, Maryland's LGBTQ civil rights advocacy organization. And as part of our work, we advocate to improve the conditions of LGBTQ youth in Maryland schools. And today we stand in strong opposition of HB 618. This bill is especially dangerous for LGBTQ youth. Oftentimes, students either confide in school staff about their gender identity or sexual orientation, or staff may learn such information from overhearing other students talk with one another on such topics. And if this information is documented and then disclosed to a student's parents, this can lead to an outing of a student's LGBTQ identity. Notably, only 1 in 3 LGBTQ youth found their home to be LGBTQ affirming this past year. And I want to be quite clear, as somebody who was personally outed in school just a couple years ago, what outing does to a young LGBTQ person. Outing is inherently violating. When you are not ready to share information that is consensually disclosed about yourself, it is as if somebody literally like reached into your body and pulled out and showed the world your deepest and most vulnerable secret. And the mental and physical health impact that has is truly lasting and detrimental. The second thing is that this bill also allows parents to opt their child out of health education related to HIV or sexuality, which is extremely harmful to all youth, LGBTQ or not. And simply said, if you don't know how HIV is transmitted and in what circumstances it happens, you don't know how to avoid getting it. And so by allowing parents to opt their child out of these topics is stripping a young person's power to make healthy decisions for themselves and putting them directly in harm's way. So for the dangers this bill poses to youth, especially LGBTQ youth in Maryland, we request unfavorable report of HB 618. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, Samantha McGuire, please, for 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, did you want to go back to the other person who unmuted? Or
no, you go ahead, please, for 2 minutes.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As a Maryland resident, parent, and national field director for American Atheists, which has nearly 1,100 constituents in Maryland, I oppose HB 6118, which would undermine education in Maryland public schools and needlessly endanger our youth. Under the pretext of concern for parents' rights, the bill creates a host of draconian new restrictions on teachers and school staff amidst both a teacher shortage and a pandemic. We strongly urge you to reject this harmful bill. Atheists value secular education in our public schools, and HB 618 harms education. By creating specific parental opt-out for any classes or any information about any topic that parents deem objectionable will make it harder for our students to accurately learn science, history, comprehensive sex education, and that list will go on and on. We need to let our educators do the educating. This bill prohibits school nurses from providing any care without written authorization from a parent, regardless of circumstances. Unfortunately, not all parents make decisions that are in the best interest of their children. Many people have sincerely held beliefs that faith and prayer or alternative pseudoscientific methods are the only medical treatments needed. Idaho has long had a religious exemption for seeking medical treatment for minors and also has a parent bill of rights that solidifies this law even further. Since these laws have been enacted, around 200 kids in Idaho have died. Most of these deaths are from conditions that are not life-threatening and could have been prevented. School staff are often the only people outside of the family that interact with children enough to identify a serious medical issue. School counselors already have a set of rules and ethics that govern what information should be disclosed to parents and other authorities. They don't need this as an additional oversight. The only rights that are being protected are a narrow fringe worried about schools stealing their children's DNA and biometric data, and those paranoid about what clubs their children have joined or what information they may be taught. Maryland public schools are meant to be safe and welcoming for all students. I strongly urge you to report unfavorably on this unnecessary and harmful bill.
Next, Christopher Fair for 2 minutes, please.
Greetings, my name is Chris Fair and I'm the Executive Director of the Frederick Center, an LGBTQ+ community resource education support and advocacy center. We stand in opposition to HB 618. Contrary to the bill's innocuous title, the legislation is a thinly veiled attempt to subvert the physical health, behavioral health, and safety of children in our communities. First, the legislation seeks to remove students from educational teaching of HIV public health crisis, a culturally defining moment for our country and community. The bill also seeks to remove students from the teaching of same-sex relationships. This is problematic for 2 reasons. First, without proper education, our community continues the generational erasure of same-sex relationships. Second, this puts at risk youth who may be questioning their sexual or gender identity and are pulled out of class by their parents. Studies are unequivocal. With a lack of proper education, youth consistently practice at-risk behaviors out of desperation for self-expression, making this a matter of life and death for children. Second, and equally egregious, this bill forces schools to release information about what after-school programs their child attends. Vulnerable LGBTQ+ youth seek out programming outside their home to affirm their identity, which is many times hidden. The data could not be any clearer. Healthy environments for self-expression create the best opportunity for a young person's happiness, education, and upward mobility. To systematically out students to their caregivers not only creates the potential for life-threatening living situations, it increases at-risk behavior for LGBTQ+ youth. For example, in the bill sponsor's home district, the Frederick County High School's 2018 Youth Behavioral Risk Survey indicates that LGBTQ high schoolers are 6 times more likely not to sleep at their parent or guardian's home, twice as likely to be kicked out or run away from their home, and 38% of LGBTQ+ youth Frederick County high schoolers report being regularly berated by their parents or guardians. This legislation is harmful to Maryland, harmful to LGBTQ+ people, and dangerous to the safety and health of the children in our state. I strongly encourage an unfavorable report from this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll circle back to Dr. Katami for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me? Good afternoon. I'm Mahin Katami, a senior medical scientist. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of HB 618, parental rights on vaccine issues. To begin with, let me quote the humorist William Hazlitt, who said that the love of liberty is the love of others, the love of power is the love of ourselves. As an expert immunologist involved in review of vaccine-related documents for legal cases, I have become seriously concerned that over-vaccination of unborn, newborn, infant with pathogen-specific vaccines are the likely causes, exacerbation, and consequences of significant increase in childhood diseases in the last 4 decades. It is heartbreaking that features of age-associated chronic diseases such as autoimmune disease, neurodegenerative, diabetes, cancer, asthma, are frequently diagnosed in children and young adults. Few words about my own expertise and science. I earned a BS degree in chemistry, a master in science education, a master in biochemistry, and my PhD was in molecular biology from University of Pennsylvania in 1980s. My research expertise are in the fields of experimental models of acute and chronic inflammatory diseases, molecular biology of diabetes,
Ms. Katami, I'm going to have to ask you to please wrap up your testimony.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegate or anyone who testified here today? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 618. Thank you. Committee, moving on to our final bill of the afternoon. House Bill 757, Delegate Schlegel's bill. There are 13 folks after Delegate Schlegel who will be testifying for 2 minutes each. Please mute yourself upon entry. Delegate Schlegel, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Chair Atterbury, and I hope my panelists are on, Barbara Ert and Kara Dansky. Do you see them on, Chair? Oh, I see Representative Ert.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Chair. For the record, I'm Delegate Kathy Shalega, here to present House Bill 757, Save Women's Sports. I'm joined on my panel. I wish we were sitting in front of you with the real panel at the real table, by Idaho State Rep and NCAA athlete and coach Barbara Ert, as well as feminist and national speaker Kara Dansky. The Save Women's Sports Executive Director was unfortunately not able to be with us today. I'm not going to use a lot of my time because I'd like to give a little extra to Representative Ert from Idaho as she's passed this bill in Idaho and helped in other states as well. First and foremost, this bill is about women and girls sports. There are no intention of this bill to demean or slight transgender athletes or transgender people. The Save Women's Sports movement, the folks on the panel with me, others in support of this measure are not trying to hurt anyone's feelings or in any way demean or disparage anyone. We simply need to ensure that women and girls have every opportunity to play and compete in sports. Caitlyn Jenner, former record-winning Olympic athlete and transgender woman, supports this effort, as do many LGBTQ athletes like Martina Navratilova. In a recent poll, 67% of American voters across our country think biological boys and men who say they identify as transgender should not be allowed to compete in girls and women's athletics. This bill or something similar has passed in 9 states, and about 40 states have seen introductions of a bill like House Bill 757. Before Title IX, girls had few opportunities to compete at the college level, and even Olympic sports were limited. We know that athletics, whether they are competitive or recreational, have huge benefits for women and girls. Girls who play sports are 60% less likely to get breast cancer. They suffer less depression and anxiety, are less likely to have an unplanned pregnancy, are more likely to leave a man who is abusive, and they learn great skills about themselves, teamwork, and leadership. Remember, competitive sports have a limited number of spots. We know that men are biologically different and they are stronger, faster, and have more cardio capacity, among other biological advantages. Those limited spots will be taken by biological men and girls will be sidelined. In the 70s, I was an athlete myself and sports were very limited. I played on the very first varsity girls soccer team in Virginia in 10th grade. And then in 11th grade, I moved to Severna Park, where they had no girls soccer team at all. So into the 80s, girls sports really started taking off and opportunities have been afforded for women and girls on an exponentially better scale. I'm fighting for the rights of girls today, the future generation of my granddaughters, to trust they can play their hearts out in sports and know it's a fair playing field, as well as protect the future gold, silver, and bronze medals of all the talented women athletes in Maryland. Please don't erase all the advancements we've made as women over the last 40 years. Please pass House Bill 757, and I'm going to turn it over to Barbara Ert, the state rep from Idaho.
Excellent. Madam Chairman, good committee. As stated, I am Representative Barbara Ehart from the great state of Idaho. I was the first.
Yep, 1 moment. We're going to start the timer. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Representative.
Excellent. So I am the sponsor and the first person to carry and pass this legislation. As was stated, I was a Division I athlete. I played collegiate basketball at Idaho State and then went on for a 15-year Division I women's basketball coaching career, where I coached at 4 fantastic institutions, including UC Santa Barbara, BYU, Washington State, and then as the head coach at Cal State Fullerton. So I know of the things of which I speak. But, let me just say probably the most important thing, Title IX literally changed my life. Kathy and I are of the same general age as of many of you are, where someone my age did not have the opportunities back in 1970 the 70s and 72 when Title IX was passed. And this opened up a whole new world for me. I'm not going to spend a lot of time reminding you of this since we are dealing with K through 12, but Idaho witnessed firsthand what happens when biological males are able to compete against our women. When June Eastwood, who had competed as John for 3 years at the University of Montana, decided to run as June the last year. Let me just share this much. June annihilated our women in the 1600 indoor championship, annihilated our women, much like Leah Thomas is doing right now. So, you know, the unique thing about this legislation is you can continue to identify however you want, because it's not a matter of how you identify. This is literally about your biological sex. And that's what makes it so equal, so protecting, because we have a definitive defining means of determining who gets to play. One of the things that you're going to hear from the other side, and since I've been testifying throughout the United States, both via Zoom and in person, I see and hear some of the same things over. That this is about the humanity, and it's about the inclusivity, that it's about the community. And those are really false narratives. I suppose under some level, farther down the sports hierarchy, that those things absolutely can come into play. But that's not what sports and competition is about. Sports is about competition, and it's ultimately about winning. If it wasn't about winning, my friends, then players wouldn't get cut. And trust me, coaches wouldn't get fired. It is about winning.
Thank you. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your testimony, please.
You know what? I am happy. I am so sorry. We had thought that maybe an extra minute had been ceded to me. And so I'm happy to wrap up my testimony and leave myself open to questions should the good committee have questions after we're done. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, good committee.
Thank you. Next, Kara Dansky for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me the opportunity to testify today in support of HB 757. My name is Kara Dansky, and I'm the president of the U.S. chapter of Women's Declaration International, or WDI. Between 1990 and 1996, I lived in Baltimore, Maryland, where I attended Johns Hopkins University. WDI is a global nonpartisan group of volunteer women dedicated to protecting women's sex-based rights. By sex, we mean the differentiation between male and female, determined by whether an X-bearing sperm or a Y-bearing sperm fertilize the X-bearing ovum, which determines the type of sexual and reproductive organs that develop and the biological differences between females and males. The Declaration reaffirms women and girls' sex-based rights and challenges the discrimination we experience from the replacement of the category of sex with that of gender identity. Although WDI is a nonpartisan organization, I am personally a lifelong Democrat. I'm a signatory to the Declaration, and my interest in this legislation before this committee is based on Article 7 of the Declaration, reaffirming women's right to the same opportunities as men to participate actively in sports and physical education. Article 7 of our Declaration is consistent with Title IX of the Educational Amendments of 1972, which states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education, program, or activity receiving federal financial assistance. In recent years, there has been an incursion of men and boys into women's and girls' athletic competition on the basis of so-called gender identity, a linguistic mechanism by which men and boys claim the identity of women and girls. This claim has no basis in material reality and is contrary to Article 1 of WDI's Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights, which states that the inclusion of men who claim to have female gender identity into the category of women in law, policies, and practice.
You muted yourself, Miss. I think
happened. I have no idea how that happened. I apologize. Girls' ability.
But can you, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. I'll give you time to wrap up here.
Absolutely. If males are permitted to compete in female sports, there's a likelihood that top spots will go to boys. A current example, of course, is Leah Thomas, formerly known as Will Thomas, who's competing on the women's team in the University of Pennsylvania. This case concerns me on a personal level because I am a 1999 alum of the University of Pennsylvania Law School. I urge you to pass HB 757. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. The remaining folks signed up will be testifying unfavorable. beginning with Alice Poole, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Atterbury and members of the committee. Hello, I am Alice Poole. I am 5'2", 100 pounds, and I am a transgender woman. And it would seem today's boogeyman. Well, I'm very pleased to meet you. According to this bill, people like me must compete against men. This is absurd. Like many women, I struggle to open a pickle jar without a tool or help, but I'm a little flattered that some of you seem to believe in me so much. If you think I am the threat this bill assumes I am, would you bet money that I could beat any man here in any sport? What do you think is a fair matchup? This bill is based on an outdated stereotype, but women come in many shapes and sizes. I am that reality. In fact, as trans healthcare and access to it improves, more women will have the chance to look more like me. This means this bill is out of touch now, but will become even more outdated and absurd every passing day. Here's what this bill looks like. Isolating a trans girl in a men's league and men's locker room means a serious risk of bullying, harassment, assault, and rape. I'm sure you can imagine what would happen to someone who looks like me. For a trans girl, this means real danger, humiliation, and fear. Please don't let men hurt women like me. You have the opportunity to prevent this real threat today. If you really do care about women and girls' safety and fairness in sports, please give an unfavorable report on House Bill 757. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Lee Blinder, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Lee Blinder. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a very proud non-binary transgender Marylander, as well as the executive director of Trans Maryland. We're deeply embarrassed to see Maryland legislators bullying young trans girls today. You can pick on trans adults if you must, but leave trans minors alone. First, I'll address my comments to any trans girls here to testify or who are watching from home. We want you to know that both transgender and cisgender adults find this bill targeting you to be in bad faith, a misunderstanding of science and biology, and an openly bigoted act against young trans girls and women like yourself who just want to have fun by enjoying the many health and wellness benefits of playing youth sports. Returning my commentary to the committee, the American Medical Association submitted a friend of the court brief last year that stated, and I quote, "In order for transgender females to live their lives fully in accordance with their gender identity, they must be able to publicly identify and compete as female athletes." The foundation of racist eugenic policies established a trajectory towards the creation of legislation such as HB 757 that seeks to criminalize the involvement of transgender and intersex girls in sports. The reality is that trans and intersex people have always existed in cultures all over the world. The intent of this bill to define girl and womanhood through exclusion is done like all efforts to define girl and womanhood, through a racialized gender policing of Black and brown women out of womanhood. This bill is not only targeting young trans girls, but specifically Black and brown trans and intersex girls. The beauty of competition and participation in competition has a long history of being limited by those requesting to ensconce their own biases and codify their bigotry. It is particularly shameful when adults attempt to perpetrate this on youth. For these reasons, we urge an unfavorable report on HB 757. Thank you for your time.
Next, Calvin Guerra, please, for 2 minutes.
My name is Calvin Guerra, and I'm here today to testify against House Bill 757. As a transgender man and as someone who's played on various men's lacrosse teams, I can't stress enough how counterproductive I believe this bill is. If House Bill 757 passed, people who look like me would be forced to play on women's sports teams. Most people I meet tell me they've never met a trans guy and are surprised when they find out I was assigned female at birth. This is because a lot of trans people blend into society without anyone around them knowing they're trans. At 18, I started playing lacrosse and joined a local men's recreation team. When I got to the first game, I noticed that there were cis men on the team who were shorter than me, less muscular than me, and in general, less physically fit than I was. The longer I played on the team, the more I realized that despite being trans, I was just as physically capable as my teammates. As I got better and better at lacrosse, I joined more teams and even ended up playing on a club team for my college. Never once did I feel like I was at a physical disadvantage due to being trans. In fact, I never even told any of my teammates or coaches that I was trans. Forcing young trans boys to play on women's sports teams would discourage them from even trying a sport in the first place. This is because being on a women's team would make any trans guy feel uncomfortable, out of place, and dysphoric. House Bill 757 claims that it wants to save women's sports, but if passed, it would force men like me to compete with women. A trans man on HRT has just as much testosterone in his body as the typical cis man does. Testosterone allows men to progress just as fast as cis men in the gym. In fact, many trans men who take up weightlifting go on to compete against and beat cis male competitors in weightlifting competitions. If trans men are already playing on men's sports teams or performing just as well or sometimes better than their cis male competitors, imagine the unfair advantage they would have competing on a women's team or in a women's league. At a surface level, HB 757 may seem like it will instill fairness in sports, but in reality, this bill will do more harm than good and has the potential to make sports even more unfair.
Next, Anaya Marino, please, for 2 minutes. Okay. Christopher Appel, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, committee members. I am Chris Appel, a resident of Columbia, Maryland. I'm here today to ask you to oppose HB 757. The language in the bill is problematic. It ignores some studies that contradict its central argument. In the preamble, the bill says that elevated testosterone levels create an unfair advantage for transgender athletes. However, studies disagree on whether that is really true. One study even found that testosterone decreased performance. There are also other reasons women may have elevated testosterone levels. About 1 in 10 women have polycystic ovarian syndrome, which can raise testosterone levels. Those women aren't banned from women's sports, nor should they be. This bill was copied almost word for word from Idaho's Fairness in Women's Sports Act. That law now has an injunction against it. No disrespect intended towards Representative Ehart. The judge in the case cited the potential for irreparable harm to the 2 plaintiffs. One of the plaintiffs, a transgender woman, recently withdrew from Boise State University after she failed to qualify for the women's cross-country team. The other plaintiff, a cisgender woman, feared that she would be subjected to invasive exams and tests to verify her biological sex. To protect themselves legally, schools may have to verify the sex of any athlete accused of lying about what team they should be on. This bill does not specify what kind of tests are permissible or whether the results must be kept confidential. And some people do not fit the binary of biological male or female. People with Klinefelter syndrome have 2 X chromosomes and a Y chromosome. This bill does not specify what we would do with a child like that. It's not clear whether they'd be allowed to play sports at all. I think this bill harms our transgender residents who are already vulnerable in many different ways. I respectfully urge an unfavorable report. Thank you very much.
Next, Shamaya Gardner for 2 minutes, please. Is she in?
Good
Oh, yeah.
afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the House Ways and Means Committee. My name is Shamoya Gardner, and I am the Executive Director of Strong Schools Maryland, here in vehement opposition to House Bill 757. Despite its misleading name, the bill does nothing to address the actual threats to the participation of women and school-age girls in sports, which are underfunding, biased media coverage, sexual harassment and assault, if equal access to such athletic opportunities exist at all. Instead, Delegate Schlega has seen fit to put forth and her colleagues to co-sponsor an incendiary violence-inducing bill that misapplies biological concepts in an attempt to codify discrimination against transgender and gender nonconforming students to the detriment of all, yes, all, including cisgender students. The Blueprint for Maryland's Future unequivocally does not share House Bill 757's vision of a transphobic system of public schools in the state. We don't get to world-class schools through hatred, bigotry, or inciting violence against marginalized communities. The separate but equal doctrine and Maryland's own ridiculous education budget battles every year should have illustrated that sufficiently by now. Strong Schools Maryland values justice. We believe the systems impacting our state students must treat them justly so they can survive. All energy spent preserving injustice within these systems is wasted at a direct cost to students, their school communities, and society at large. We urge every member of this committee to reject House Bill 757 on the basis of our written testimony and leave this bill in the drawer. Instead, we urge you to devote your precious time over these 90 days to advancing legislation that affirms the life and aspirations of transgender and gender nonconforming students, support their physical safety, education, food, health, and housing priorities instead, pass bills that affirm their right to exist publicly. That work will save lives, and that is our future. Thank you.
Just for the committee, Anaya Marino couldn't be here today, but would like us to refer to her written testimony. Justin Gibson, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, members of the committee. My name is Justin Gibson. I have a bachelor's degree in kinesiology, which is exercise science, and a master's degree in biomechanics, both from the University of Kentucky. I've been a certified personal trainer for over 10 years, and during my career, I've worked with hundreds of cis and trans men and women to help them achieve their fitness pursuits. I'm here today because it is in my professional opinion that this bill does not accurately reflect the science of sports performance. Men, on average, certainly do possess significant performance advantages over women, like larger muscles, stronger tendons and ligaments, and more oxygen carrying capacity. However, all of these relevant sex differences are primarily and directly caused by hormones. The bill defines sex as binary and unchanging, but the core mechanism responsible for sex differences in sport, hormones, is absolutely subject to change. Specifically, the kind of change a trans person might experience when they have access to gender-affirming care. As you saw with Alice, a 5'2", 100-pound trans woman, those hormones are way more responsible for athletic performance than birth anatomy. This bill doesn't protect girls. It ironically ensures that trans boys will be forced to dominate female sports because of their birth anatomy, and it will deny trans girls the opportunity for fair competition regardless of their hormones. Voting against this bill is the scientifically responsible thing to do. Thank you for your consideration.
Next, Nicole Hollywood for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, committee. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Nicole Hollywood. I'm a resident of Maryland's Eastern Shore, residing in District 37B. I'm a professor at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, president of Salisbury PFLAG, and a parent to a transgender son. I'm here today to state my opposition to HB 757, a misguided bill rooted in transphobia that is simply not backed by the scientific research. Transgender children, like all children, vary in athletic ability, and there is zero scientific evidence that transgender student athletes affect the fairness or competition of sports. Further, HB 757 is psychologically harmful to children, and the American Academy of Pediatrics chapters have testified against this type of legislation across the country, as it goes against their policy ensuring comprehensive care and support for transgender children. Gender is a spectrum, and not all individuals identify as male or female. Transgender people are beloved friends, family, coworkers, neighbors, students, community members, children, and parents. Being transgender is simply not the whole of anyone's identity, because gender identity is just one small piece of who one is as an individual. Transgender athletes participate in sports for the same reasons as everyone else: to get and stay healthy, to be part of a team, and to build a sense of belonging with their peers. Many who oppose the inclusion of trans athletes erroneously claim that allowing trans athletes to compete will harm cisgender women, but excluding transgender and gender nonconforming students hurts all students and all athletes. Denying transgender youth access to athletic programs is discrimination. It is regressive and unjust and not in line with our moniker as the Free State. If this bill passes, it will be a form of state-censored intolerance, and those who support this bill will be on the wrong side of history. Thank you for your time, and I urge you for an unfavorable report out of committee.
And Dr. Hollywood, I just want to say that that's a pretty cool name, Dr. Hollywood, if I may say so myself. Christopher Fair, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Greetings. My name is Chris Fair. I'm the Executive Director of the Frederick Center, an LGBTQ community resource education support and advocacy center. We join our LGBTQ plus community in opposition to HB 757. a bill simply designed to judge and shame transgender people in sports. I do not want to repeat our presenters today, but I do want to underscore some salient points. One, this bill deliberately overly simplifies biological sex to discriminate against transgender people. Two, this legislation is not based on science. The National Institute of Health has concluded, quote, there is no direct or consistent research suggesting transgender female individuals have an athletic advantage at any stage of their transition, end quote. Moreover, transgender women exhibit lower testosterone levels than cisgender women with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which affects up to 12% of all cisgender women. Four, this policy would be openly discriminatory against thousands of students in the Maryland public school system who are transgender. This issue touches every school system in our state and impacts so many young people. Additionally, the introduction of a discriminatory bill such as this has detrimental impacts on the health, safety, and well-being of trans people all over the state. On behalf of the Frederick Center, I want to apologize to the transgender women and girls who once again are forced to defend themselves as they are used as a political tool to drum up unwarranted fear in our community. What has been made clear to me by the favorable testimony here today is that the testifiers do not believe transgender women are women. They are and should be treated as such. I pray that the bill's sponsor and co-sponsors take the time to reflect on the mental health crisis they are creating when deliberately targeting young girls like this way. I not only hope this committee will provide an unfavorable report, but that the bill's sponsor will withdraw the legislation for the safety of our children. Thank you.
Murphy for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. Good afternoon. My name is Sonia Murphy. I use she and her pronouns, and I am a lifelong resident of gorgeous Prince George's County. I'm appearing today in my personal capacity. I am the proud aunt of a transgender teenager. My nephew lost his mother to breast cancer when he was 8 years old, and I have the pleasure of being his full-time guardian. I come before you today to express my opposition to House Bill 757 and to urge you to continue to let all kids play sports in Maryland. My nephew is a happy and healthy 16-year-old who loves soccer, basketball, art, and video games. He is a natural-born athlete and a proud member of the soccer team at his high school. The least notable thing about my nephew is the fact that he was assigned female at birth. And because of that fact, should this bill pass, he will no longer be permitted to play the sports he loves with his teammates. Taking away sports would strip my nephew of his identity as a student athlete. According to the National Federation of State High School Associations, 8 million kids participate in high school sports in the United States. This includes an estimated 35,000 transgender kids, accounting for less than half of 1% of student athletes. Excluding kids who just want to be kids and enjoy sports with their friends is not the answer to equality in sports. In fact, it's the polar opposite. And while the number of transgender kids playing sports may be low, the number of transgender youth who attempt suicide is alarmingly high. The Trevor Project's third annual national survey on LGBTQ youth mental health found that 52% of all transgender young people in the United States seriously contemplated killing themselves in 2020. This issue is bigger than sports. It's about inclusion and it's about survival. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my comments today. Please provide an unfavorable report and continue to let all kids play sports in Maryland.
Next, CP Hoffman, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm CP Hoffman. I am the Policy Director at Free State Justice, which is Maryland's statewide LGBTQ advocacy organization. A lot of the points I was going to hit on have already been spoken to by other individuals here today, so I'm just going to talk about a few things quickly. First, I want to emphasize that contrary to some of the testimony we heard earlier, this bill would actually violate Title IX. Under Supreme Court precedent, the interpretations of lower courts and of the Federal Department of Education, Title IX's protections on the basis of sex also include gender identity. So And so this bill, by forcing transgender girls to compete as boys, would discriminate against their gender identity and would thus violate Title IX. So this bill would basically be an invitation to a federal lawsuit that would be, it would be patently unconstitutional. Second, this is a one-size-fits-all solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Trans people have been competing in the Olympics since 2004. They've been competing in the NCAA for about as long. There has, to this day, been a single trans person who has won a medal in the Olympics, and that is someone who was assigned female at birth who was competing as a woman in the Canadian women's soccer team. Now, I don't think that we should necessarily be calling them a woman, but that's the only person who has won a medal as a trans athlete. Also, there have been some references to Leah Thomas. I want to point out that Leah Thomas recently, there were 300 of her competitors and fellow athletes who signed a letter endorsing her competing with them. And in fact, the person whose record she recently broke was quoted over the weekend as saying that records are made to be broken. I'm a faster swimmer because of the fast swimmers of the past, and the future of swimming will be faster because of the women at the top of the NCAA today, like Leah Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy McDermott, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As Ms. Sonia Williams-Murphy previously noted, 52% of all transgender and non-binary young people in the US seriously contemplated killing themselves in 2020. The majority of those were 13 to 17-year-olds. These children thought it would be better to be dead rather than trying to live with rejection, isolation, loneliness, bullying, and being targeted by politicians and activists pushing anti-trans legislation. Make no mistake that HB 757 is a boilerplate piece of anti-trans legislation. The title of the bill is Save Women's Sports Act, as if the sponsors of this bill are demonstrating concern and dedication to protecting women. But yet they voted no on HB 206, which would have largely affected working mothers' ability to vote. They voted no on HB 123 regarding wage history, a move that has historically held women to a permanently lower pay scale. They also voted no to HB 1002, which would prohibit firearms on college campuses. These are just a few examples of why it is quite evident that this bill is in no way an effort to protect women or students, but is a thinly veiled attempt at mongering fear amongst constituents and legislating against a phantom. I'm a woman assigned female at birth who has played sports most of my life. I was never a gifted or natural athlete by any means. I oftentimes had to work twice as hard to be half as good. But through great determination and the push from my teammates, I ended up on varsity and all-star teams. Many of my teammates who were assigned female at birth were stronger, faster, taller, more athletic, better than me. I never once thought of this as unfair. That's sports, that's competition, that's how it works. Playing with and against them made me better. I've also played with and against transgender women in physical contact sports. Sometimes they won, sometimes I won. Together, we got stronger and better. There was never a notion that it was unfair or that these athletes had some inherent advantage over me. And there was never a notion that they were men. They were women. They are women. For many young people, there isn't a sense of belonging anywhere except that field, that court, that track, that pool. The moment they set foot on it, they lose themselves and find themselves at the same time. They're part of something.
Dermot, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your testimony, please.
Absolutely, thank you. Trans women and trans girls belong with their team. They need the camaraderie and support. I urge an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the committee to the bill sponsor or anyone who testified? Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can ask Representative Ehart, several people have mentioned legal challenges. What is that the case in Idaho, and what was the outcome of that?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good committee. As it stands right now, yes, Idaho is challenged immediately, as they said they would. The ACLU filed a lawsuit, and it went to the federal district court, and we had 2 Idaho State athletes that were enjoined to join the lawsuit because of what had happened to them. It was sent to the 9th Circuit where they heard it, and it was determined at the 9th Circuit that there was no longer standing. And so they sent it back down to the federal district court where it stands right now. And as we understand it, as what's happening right now, they're trying to see if Lindsay Hecox is yet eligible, and if not eligible, would be dismissed.
Delegate Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate Shalega. Representative Earhart, was there any punishment from the NCAA? You know, what were some of the ramifications about this bill in your state?
Madam Chairman, good committee. I appreciate that question, actually, because there had been a lot of false accusations kind of swirling around and kind of conflating what the NCAA was saying and what the ACLU was saying. Idaho, nor any other state that's enacted this policy, the NCAA has not punished nor taken any action. As a matter of fact, their recent action, though some wanted to see them do more, but the recent action to decide to step back and allow the governing bodies such as, swimming or basketball to help make those decisions was, an interesting move. So no, there's absolutely, you do not have to worry about punishment from the NCAA. And besides that, when you think about some of the states, the great athletic states like Florida, Arkansas, with the SEC and the ACC, it'd be pretty difficult, I think, to punish a state that had the sort of sports programs and conferences that they have.
Thank you. Just one quick follow-up, Madam Chair, if you don't mind. Representative Earhart, so you mentioned other states. I was trying to take notes. What other states besides Idaho has moved forward with this up to this point?
Madam Chairman, good committee. Let me make sure I don't leave a state out, but of course, Idaho leading the way, Mississippi, Arkansas, then we had West Virginia, Montana, we had Florida, and then of course this year we had South Dakota join. They all have both high school and higher ed. We have Tennessee and Alabama and Texas, who also signed the K through 12. Tennessee and Alabama are now have legislation going forward to include higher education.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Delegate Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I didn't intend on raising my hand, but with the representative, welcome to our committee. I have granddaughters who live in Alabama. One is a competitive tennis player, and she has played in Alabama against boys. For whatever reason, they have girls playing against boys, etc. Never has she complained about the fact that it is this kind of competition. My question is really, and it's a very simple one, the banning of transgender young people or persons from athletics. So what is the bottom line? Is it that they just don't play at all? Is it that they play against only persons that they were born gender identification? Because again, we want to make sure that all of our young people are given a chance and that they are not traumatized by decisions that we as legislators make. Thank you.
And Madam Chairman, good representative, I do agree with you. And so from a Division I women's basketball coach's perspective, having seen the advantages of the men, the way we are not trying to ban anyone, of course, we are asking them to participate in the category of their biological sex. You see, if I also, with my background in coaching and camps and all of that, continue to run basketball leagues. Now, what I have done is I've centered on niches for kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and we will get little boys, a team of all kindergarten little boys against a team of all kindergarten little girls, and our poor little girls are getting annihilated. This is inherent, generally speaking. I know there are exceptions to who we are. So as women, as girls, we have an opportunity and the boys have an opportunity. And what we're essentially doing now is we're saying, depending on how they want to identify, we're going to give the boys 2 opportunities, depending on which category. And essentially at some point that will take away an opportunity of a young woman. And that's the part that we don't think fair. Now, getting to your other point, we absolutely believe there should be co-ed tennis. I've taken up tennis because I probably can't play basketball very well anymore. Tennis is unique in that you have mixed doubles, and so they're kind of used to that. You're on opposite sides of the net. But I absolutely support us looking into more co-ed, and the legislation allows for co-ed. And, you know, many sports, even our Special Olympics, had to start somewhere to create a category so that they could compete. If for some reason they didn't feel like they could compete or felt comfortable competing in their biological sex. And one thing I would like to state, this is not going to hurt. As we look at Title IX, if we have a biological girl who wants to go through the process to take the hormones and the testosterone to compete as a male, it's not going to hurt them on our women's side, because that we commonly refer in sports, we call that doping, and they would be ineligible to compete on the women's or the girls' side.
Are there any other questions from the committee? I'm just scanning for hands really quickly here. Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 757. That concludes the hearings for the Ways and Means Committee today. It is 4:53, committee members, at 5 p.m. 5 p.m. Click on the other link so we can have a quick voting session. Thank you.